Good morning. Welcome in, Mike and Mike. Coach Stink in for the guys today. It's a Friday, a beautiful Friday, last Friday in the month of July, I believe, isn't it? What's today's date? One more Friday? We might. I think so. But anyway, welcome in. This is Mike and Mike. A lot to talk about. Yeah, well, I didn't look before I got here today. So I was sleeping in a little bit late. But you hear the guys from Florida Georgia Line. Good morning to those guys as well. NFL training camps are off and running, and we will get to plenty this morning. The Pac-12 coaches are on campus today, so David Shaw will be here, the brand-new coach at USC. Steve Sarkisian will be here.
I already made a rookie mistake. Apparently, I didn't turn on my mic.
Apparently, it's still not turned on. Yeah.
Right there.
No, that's mine. There you go.
Oh, that mic. There we go. Rookie mistake. Apparently, I didn't have on my mic. Normally, guys, I don't know if you've seen my new contract. I need a guy that turns on and off my mic.
We've got that guy for you. His name's Mikey C.
Mikey, come on now.
Come on, Mikey.
Stop slacking. I'm good now. All right. Good.
All right, so there. Smooth start to the show today. Smooth start to the show
I thought that
today.
was mine. I had papers all over mine.
It's okay, Stink. We haven't been together now.
I apologize.
It's all right. Bottom of the hour, though, Jameson Hensley will be here to discuss the two-game suspension. We'll talk about that in about 10 minutes because I know you've got some strong takes on two-game suspensions for domestic battery situation. And we've printed out a lot of suspensions over the course of the last 4, 5, 6 years, what guys got for it. And it's a little bit shocking when you look at it and you compare it to Ray Rice. So we'll get to that in about 10 minutes. But first, it broke yesterday afternoon, Stink, about 5 o'clock. And we spent an entire week talking about LeBron James going to Cleveland. And then another week talking about, is Kevin Love going to be traded to Cleveland to make this big three of Irving, LeBron, and Kevin Love. And now at least it looks like on paper, if that trade is going to happen, it's going to have to wait for 30 days because the Cavs have signed their overall number one pick, Andrew Wiggins, to a deal. And NBA rules state that you cannot trade a player for 30 days after you sign them to a contract. So I don't know what this says to me, but what it says on paper is that we can sit around for a month and not worry about any movement for the Cavs and the T-Wolves.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it says. And I think sometimes, often in trades, and I don't know exactly how the NBA works. I'm not the insider. I don't have all those facts, but the bottom line is oftentimes in trades, you want to make sure that you have a contract in place, and we see this all the time before kind of a sign and trade deal. Mm-hmm. Make sure that we know exactly what we're getting and that this particular player is going to be signed for the long term so that, we know exactly what it is that we're getting into. And so, I don't know if that counts for rookies or whatever. Well, I understand he can't be traded until August 23rd, but at least if he is trade bait, if this thing does go down with Love as the Minnesota Timberwolves, you know exactly kind of what you're getting in return.
Well, I will say this, that with the new rookie scale and the way they do rookie contracts, everybody is slotted, which is why you don't have these long holdouts anymore. It's why you don't have a rookie making $40 or $50 million. It's very similar to the NFL now, that the number one pick makes 11 million something. Then number two is like 10 something. So everybody is slotted in. It's just getting them signed and getting them under contract.
Right, exactly. And that's exactly what I'm saying. It's done now.
Yeah.
It's signed, sealed, delivered. You don't have to worry about that aspect of it. If you made that trade, that was another kind of could have been a bone of contention that all of a sudden now we've got to get this kid signed. And I understand the slotting aspect of it. The NFL's the same way with the rookie wage scale. But the bottom line is this. It's one less headache that you have, so it could make that move smoother in the future, August 23rd, when he becomes available for trade. So we'll see exactly kind of how this thing pans out. But you're right. We can pump the brakes a little bit. They can start working on other deals. They can continue to kind of work through this thing. It does seem like it's a foregone conclusion that the Cavs, and I know other teams have jumped into the mix, right? Chicago's jumped into the mix.
Very much
but it does seem like the Cavs have like this side deal or are continuing to work out and are the number one kind of place right now that it looks like Love may go.
The coach is stinking for the guys. It's Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. More independent agents sell Progressive Insurance than any other brand. Find an agent at Progressive.com. Now that's Progressive. I did think about this, though, last night, Stink. And sometimes we have a tendency especially in the media, to put all of our eggs in one story basket, so to speak. And what if the Cavs have now said, you know what? We're not going to go after Kevin Love anymore. You know what? We're going to keep this kid who's got unparalleled talent as far as this draft is concerned, and maybe he can be the Scottie Pippen to LeBron's Jordan. Maybe they've decided that he's that good, that they're not going to go after Kevin Love anymore. I would think that would be the wrong move if that Love trade was not dead, but maybe that's what they've decided by signing him. It's a possibility.
There's always that. There's always that, kind of this kid from a development standpoint, we think the sky's the limit. We think he's going to be a superstar. And so you always have to kind of weigh that, versus what Kevin Love is. And, the things that make me think that this trade is going to go down eventually is that, number one, LeBron James and the contract he signed. The contract he signed is a 2-year contract with an opt-out after the first year.
Yep.
So that says to me, I want to know that we're going in the right direction. I want to know that we're going after a championship sooner than later. It's not a developmental championship. I want the championship ASAP. Now, the trade thing, Kevin Love is still young. What is he, 26 years old? So the trade aspect of this says, I'm going to trade a unproven commodity in Wiggins, who is a very defensive-oriented player right now. Some people think he's a defensive stalwart. He's got great ability in that regard, but he's got offensive potential, but he's not there from a developmental standpoint. So I'm trading an unknown commodity, which is Andrew Wiggins, for a known commodity, which is Kevin Love, who's a 25-12 guy every night in the NBA.
Kevin Love's going to be 26 in September, so you were really, really close. It's right there. I'm glad you brought up the LeBron James deal, because the more I think about it, and the fact that you're absolutely right, he has the Cavs over a barrel, meaning if they don't do something that he likes, then he can get out if he so chooses. But think about this for a second. There is no way on God's green earth that after everything that's happened and after everything that he has done, that if they do something he doesn't like to the point that he wants to walk away, that he would ever walk away. So he can do all these 1+1 contracts he wants to. But the bottom line is he's going nowhere. He can't go anywhere or he will be crucified.
But he's
crucified.
But, Coach, he's already been crucified. And
Not like this.
But you can point to Dan Gilbert. That letter that Dan Gilbert wrote was still on the Cleveland Cavaliers website.
I forgot about it.
I forgot about it. Right up until LeBron looked like he was coming like 2 days before he signed his contract.
It was a link to the website.
Well, okay, wait a minute. Let me just say this. He could still point the finger to say Dan Gilbert, blah, 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 blah. But don't you have this feeling? What do you call the puppeteer? Is it a marionette where they just...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Pulling the strings.
Yeah, you're pulling. Yeah. He's just over the Cleveland Cavaliers right now going, woo, woo. I'm LeBron James. I'm in charge. And, oh, by the way, we got a new TV contract coming up in 2 years. And guess what? I am going to get paid again.
I think it was more about that than it was about, hey, you guys need to do stuff that I like, and you need to get players that I want, or I will walk. I think it's more the money than it is, because I think LeBron knows there is no way that he could ever leave after his letter, not after Dan Gilbert's letter. After his letter, there's no way he could walk away.
Yeah, especially after his letter that Frank Caliendo read as Morgan Freeman. I mean, think about this now, and this is crazy. LeBron James, I would say 99.999% of us in life will never, ever achieve the type of leverage that LeBron James has. Think about that. You will never be in a position, I will never be in a position where I have that kind of leverage over my employer.
Very true.
He is, he is calling the shots in Cleveland. Flat out.
If I was the owner, I would let him as well. They're about to embark on unparalleled success, at least for that franchise, that they've never had.
We have talked since the NFL draft, and since the end of the NBA season, And since the procurement stage of the NBA season, we have talked about the city of Cleveland more than we've talked about them since Jim Brown was playing running back for Cleveland.
There's no doubt. There's absolutely no doubt.
Or maybe Brian Sipe and the Cardiac Kids, right? But,
wow.
I mean, it goes back a ways.
There's been a Brian Sipe sighting this morning on Mike and Mike. That's amazing. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And we will continue to talk about Cleveland until this deal is done, until October gets here, until November gets here. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. Plenty more on the Cavs and Andrew Wiggins throughout the morning. Coming up in just 30 seconds, does the punishment fit the crime? But first, you can ask any big leaguer who's ever faced a 90-mile-an-hour fastball what baseball's all about, and he'll tell you it's all about being ready. Just like business travelers who take being ready to the next level with La Quinta Inns and Suites. Just book at LQ.com. And on the day of your arrival, La Quinta will send a ready-for-you alert the second your room is ready. So after a long day of business hardball, you'll know that Pillow Top Bed is ready for a seventh-inning stretch. The ready-for-you alert only at LQ.com. La Quinta is ready for you, so you'll be ready for business. All right, it's the coach and Stink in for the guys. It's Mike and Mike on a Friday. Coming up in about 20 minutes, Jameson Hensley, who covers the Baltimore Ravens, will join us live here on the program. And the suspension yesterday, Stink, finally came down for Ray Rice for the incident in the Atlantic City casino elevator, where almost everybody has seen the video of him dragging his now wife out of the elevator. Nobody has seen, at least publicly, the video of what happened inside the elevator. So that we don't know. But from what we do know, and he met with Commissioner Roger Goodell on June 16th. And after that meeting, and up until yesterday, the NFL was deciding on a punishment. They have suspended him for 2 games. He has taken ownership of that. He has admitted that he made a mistake, a gigantic mistake. He's also going to be fined another $58,000, which incidentally is his game check from a year ago, not from this year. So they're saving him about $170,000 by fining him that way. Where did you stand, or where do you stand on if this suspension for what we have seen is enough?
I have been very vocal about my disappointment in the commissioner's decision to only make this a 2-game suspension. Domestic violence in this country is first off, we all know it's an egregious act. It's a horrendous act. It's one of those things that I think is somewhat of an epidemic in this country. And you had an opportunity as the commissioner of the National Football League to say, we will not tolerate this type of action in our game. We already have enough negative publicity based upon this is a blood sport. This is a physical sport. We see guys get into fights. We see the physical nature of the National Football League. And we saw the whole, we've seen the Bountygate thing come down in recent years. We've seen what went on in Miami a year ago with all the bullying aspect of that, right? So this league already has a reputation for that type of activity. Now we have an opportunity as a league to basically put the hammer down and say, we will not tolerate domestic violence in this league anymore. And we get a 2-game suspension. And I find that absolutely cowardly on the part of the National Football League.
What would you, how many games would have been enough for you?
You know what? I thought it would come down to about 8 games, and
really?
then maybe you appeal it and you rescind a couple of games or whatever. But here's the biggest issue for me, and it drives me crazy. We are fining and suspending guys for playing football. Helmet-to-helmet hits. We're getting fines. We're getting suspensions. And you know what we do as a league? What do? We run highlights of those hits, right?
That's right.
We market that activity. We market that physicality because you can't do it. The average person doesn't have the guts or the talent to stand on an NFL football field and do that, and yet we fine and suspend guys for those things in which we market and sell. And we find them a game here. Here we go. James Harrison hit on Colt McCoy.
I remember that one.
Right?
I remember that one.
On the sideline, Colt McCoy, the training staff is looking at his wrist. They send him back into the game. James Harrison loses $100,000, and he gets a game suspension for playing football. And we showed the highlight 3,700 times.
That's right. That's right.
How about Ndamukong Suh? You remember the Thanksgiving game in 2011?
Of course.
Evan Dietrich Smith's cutting him. He's on his legs the whole time. And Ndamukong Suh stomps on his arm. And it was a fairly innocuous stomp, right? That's a 2-game suspension.
Very, very obvious.
In the heat of the battle, in a game, you stomp on a guy's arm, that's a 2-game suspension. You allegedly punch your fiancée in the face and drag her out of the elevator, and there's video evidence, and that's a 2-game suspension? Something does not jive. As I said on Twitter yesterday, the only place in the world where an alleged punch to the face can lead to a slap on the wrist. That's the NFL.
Well, I think a lot of people feel the same way that you do. I will say this, just to play devil's advocate, that we have not seen what happened inside the elevator.
No, but we did see her get drug out of it.
There's no question.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Mortensen on why a 2-game suspension for Ray Rice.
Ray Rice certainly had no prior history of misconduct, had not had a domestic dispute, and his wife, Janae, who they're now married, she was his fiancée then. She went to New York with Ray Rice to meet with Commissioner Roger Goodell, and I'm told she made a very strong impression, and she talked about what happened inside the elevator. We saw the TMZ video of what happened outside when he was dragging her out unconscious. And inside the elevator, I'm told, for those who've seen the video, it wasn't pretty. In fact, she attacks him. We don't know the reason why. And he strikes her hard, and her head, according to the sources I've spoken with, struck the rail inside the elevator, and she was unconscious. But she basically portrayed herself well to Commissioner Goodell. Ray Rice certainly had a history that favored him with Commissioner Goodell.
Okay, does that change anything of your thought process?
No, because, again, this is an opportunity to make a statement. Listen, I understand the drug issues in the National Football League, and I understand how that program works. You have to fall into, for the street drugs, marijuana and things of that nature, you have to fall into the program, and you have to fail multiple tests before you're even submitted. Before you get suspended in this league, you're failing multiple tests. Now, PEDs, right away. First offense, 4 games, right? I get it. I understand it. The punishment certainly kind of fits the crime in that aspect. You have to fail multiple, like marijuana tests before you get into the program, before you're actually suspended in this league. But let's face it, I think the average public looks at that where marijuana is legal in the state of Colorado, it's legal in the state of Washington. You're saying guys getting a year-long suspension. Josh Gordon, now he's had multiple issues with DUIs and multiple offenses, and I get it, and I'm all for the year-long suspension. But I think people have a really tough time looking at marijuana suspension for a year, domestic violence, 2 games. I think there's a real disconnect for the general public.
Okay,
there.
well, let me ask you this then. I have a tendency to agree with what you're saying. However, for Ray Rice, who is a guy that's not like Josh Gordon, who has not had multiple offenses, has never been in trouble ever, as far as we know, and after this incident happened, he met with the commissioner. He's done everything they've asked him to do. He continues to go to counseling. In his letter yesterday, he said the counseling has helped him and his wife as they continue their relationship.
Right.
Shouldn't he be given some latitude or some rope since he has had such a stellar reputation and since the incident, he's done everything that he's been asked to do?
Absolutely he should. Absolutely he should take all those things into account. But you know what? Just like you, I'm sure, when you've gotten in trouble, just like when I have gotten in trouble, I'm very remorseful for what I did after I got in trouble. I'll do the right steps, right? I mean,
that's true. It's easy to be sorry afterwards.
Right, but here's the thing. Everything else seems to be, at the very least, a 4-game suspension. We're getting these same, we're getting guys that are doing less, more innocuous, less egregious on-field in the heat of battle suspensions for games and 2 games than what we saw on that video. I just don't think the punishment necessarily fits the crime. And I think you're right. Ray Rice is probably a great kid. And I know, I'm sure in his heart he's very remorseful, and I'm glad they're working on their issues. I get all those things. I get that. But at some point, you have an opportunity as the commissioner to really send a message. By the way, in October, you know what we'll be doing? We'll be marketing to ladies, Susan B. Coleman. Everybody will be wearing pink. You can get your pink Ray Rice jersey right here for only whatever you're going to pay for it. Right? We're going to be marketing. We're going to be marketing to that female audience. Do you not think this sends the wrong message to the female audience that you're going to be marketing to in October, where everybody's going to be in a pink jersey and have pink cleats and have pink towels and have all those things? Because I certainly think you've missed the boat here.
All right, it's Mike and Mike reminding you that don't miss SportsCenter's NFL training camp coverage of all 32 teams in 10 days. Today's SportsCenter's live at training camps with the Patriots, Seahawks, 49ers, Jags, Titans, and Johnny Manziel's Cleveland Browns. So a busy, busy day throughout the NFL. I will say this to back up your point, that there are players that are certainly saying right now that apparently a 4-game suspension is not worth stopping the smoking of marijuana. Mm-hmm. And Justin Blackmon gets arrested again, and you've got a guy with first-round talent that is throwing it all away. So unless you send a message in other aspects, like a longer suspension, and I'm not saying other players are going to say, if I hit her, I'm only going to miss 2 games, because there's guys that are saying, you know what, I'll miss the rest of my career over some marijuana. So maybe a statement does need to be made on some level. If you take it that far.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right, coming up next, just getting started. What does Ray Rice's suspension mean for the Ravens' offense on the field? We're going to go to Baltimore live next, just getting started. Thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday. It's the Coach and Stink. And for the guys, it's Mike and Mike.
All things being equal, and I totally understand where you're coming from, all things being equal, I still look at it like you failed as a league.
And I do too.
Right, you failed as a league because I think that punishment should have been stiffer based upon some of the punishments you've meted out over the years, especially on-field things in the heat of the battle, getting fined for playing football. The same
Could not agree more.
Yeah, the same amount of games that a guy that with this it's not even alleged, with this domestic violence incident. I just think it should have been more. And that's just, my opinion. It doesn't make me hate Ray Rice or, hate the commissioner. I just think they dropped the ball on this.
All right, Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guest today, Mike Smith at 8 o'clock, David Shaw of Stanford, Steve Sarkisian, the new head coach at USC, will all join us with their Subway Fresh Take. Joining us right now live here on the show, he covers the Ravens, does a great job, Jamison Hensley on the Subway Fresh Take hotline. Jamison, they're in Baltimore. How did the 2-game suspension play out yesterday to the public?
Well, here in Baltimore, obviously, they were, I think, compared to nationally, there was less uproar over it. Obviously, here in Baltimore, they've been around Ray Rice. They've seen what he's done around the community for 6 or 7 years. And believe me, I'm not saying that in any way should help him get a pass. But I do believe that Goodell looked at the whole picture and had to take a lot of things into consideration. And I think Ray Rice's track record of, here in Baltimore, he led an anti-bullying campaign, which is, kind of ironic in the situation that he put himself into. And I think because of that, and as you pointed out and touched upon, that his then fiance and now wife stood by him every step of the way, I think that also worked into his favor. Honestly, when around Baltimore and with the Ravens, kept hearing that brace for a 4-game suspension. So when it came out to be a 2-game suspension, from a football standpoint, I think that was the best case scenario the Ravens could have hoped.
In regards to that 2-game suspension, John Harbaugh, his coach, said yesterday, which I thought it was a bad use of words on his part, but I understand kind of where he was coming from. He said it's not that big of a deal in the overall scheme of things. Obviously talked about domestic violence and the punishment for doing those type of things. But let's take it back onto the field where he said it's not that big a deal. Do you feel that way for the Baltimore Ravens? Do you feel like it's not that big of a deal considering they're coming off an 8-8 season where their quarterback struggled? And let's face it, Ray Rice was not the kind of running back that we had seen in previous seasons.
No, I believe me, every NFL coach is going to try to downplay this because they don't want to have a distraction. But let's be honest, this is a big deal. Ray Rice, even though he averaged 3.1 yards per carry, which is the worst of his career, when you look at that backfield, he is obviously their top option. You know, you look at the other guys in the backfield. You have Bernard Pierce, a backup, who is coming off shoulder surgery and averaged 2.9 yards per carry last year. You have Justin Forsett, a free agent they picked up. He had a grand total of 6 carries for Jacksonville last year. And then they have the rookie fourth-round pick, Lorenzo Taliaferro. He played at Coastal Carolina. You know, that's not Alabama or Auburn. So if the Ravens have their way, they want to have Ray Rice in that backfield. So for weeks and weeks and not knowing how many games he was going to be missing and the possibility he can miss 4 games, 6 games hanging over them, it was a big deal. So now they know that he's only going to miss those first couple of weeks. They can plan accordingly as far as reps, rotation, everything like that. And I think this just gives them another step going forward that they can try to move past this incident. It's going to take a while, but I think internally as a team, this is just another step for them to just kind of move this into their past.
We're talking to Jameson Hensley. He covers the Ravens for ESPN. Leadership is something, Jameson, that the Ravens desperately need right now. And Terrell Suggs recently did an interview, and he basically said that he wants Joe Flacco, who is now a $20 million a year guy, to be more vocal, to be more of a leader, and be the guy that this team can turn to. In your mind, being around the team as much as you are, is that somebody that Joe Flacco can be?
I think when you talk about vocal leaders here in Baltimore, the epitome is always going to be Ray Lewis. And for anyone to think that someone is going to be as vocal and as charismatic and be that type of leader like Ray Lewis is just ridiculous. And I think everybody here understands that. But in the kind of context of Joe Flacco, they think he can become more vocal. And the situation that he's, unlike Matt Ryan, when Matt Ryan was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, he was the man. I mean, he went down there in that locker room. He could be the leader, the quarterback, everything. Joe Flacco, for most of his NFL career, walked in that locker room. He had Ray Lewis. He had Ed Reed. Then he also added Anquan Bolden. He didn't really have to step up into that role. I think last year he made some strides in that, but I think being a year removed and having a team underachieve, you kind of get a sense early in this training camp that he's feeling that he needs to take it upon himself, being the quarterback, to become a better leader. And the Ravens and I think Terrell Suggs and the Ravens are only trying to encourage that and see if they can get more out of him being that leader.
Since we're on the subject of Joe Flacco, Jameson, he gambled on himself. He was phenomenal in the playoffs. They won the Super Bowl. Last year, a regression. Obviously lost his favorite receiver in Anquan Bolden. That some of those things went down. 8-8 season. Really didn't play that well. How does the hiring of Gary Kubiak as the offensive coordinator play in to what I'm sure the Baltimore Ravens hope is a bounce-back season for Joe Flacco?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Gary Kubiak is stressing is getting rid of the ball more quickly. And with that his style of the West Coast offense, they want you to take that 3 to 5 step drop, and when you hit that 5th step, they want the ball out of your hands. They want him to be more decisive. It's a total different system compared to when he was under Ken Cameron and Jim Caldwell, where he dropped back and it was more of go through your progressions, find the open guy, stretch the field more. I'm not saying they're going to take the deep ball away from Joe Flacco. I think what they're trying to do is make him become more efficient, more accurate type passer. It's been some up and downs, honestly, in training camp, but they feel that if they can do that and go away from more of, I think last year they got into a situation where they tried to let him be more of a Peyton Manning type quarterback, where they went 3 wide, they stretched it out, they tried to put everything on his shoulders. And the result of an 8-8 season, I think they realize they got to get away from that. They have to get into more of a system where they have a little bit more control and just try to use more of Joe Flacco's talents rather than just putting so much on his plate.
Well, the Ravens are the first team since 2009 that will start with 3 divisional opponents. Start the season, Bengals, Steelers, and the Browns, so a tough start for them. Jameson, thank you for getting up so early this morning. We appreciate and enjoy the season, okay?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, guys.
That's Jameson Hensley on the Subway Fresh Take hotline with his Subway Fresh Take. We want to open up the chat line to you this morning. 740-535-MIKE. That's 740-535-6453. We're getting so much response on Twitter and on Facebook and email. We want to know what you think. Was the 2-game suspension for Ray Rice not enough? And why? Give us a call on the chat line. We'll play some of those throughout the morning. The next question, is it right that talent affects treatment of players in the NFL? We've got another example of a high-profile guy. His team stood beside him, and it looks like it's going in the right direction. We'll discuss that next. Stinking the coach in for the guys. It's Mike. Stinky coach in for the guys. It's Mike and Mike on a Friday morning. Coming up at 7:10 Eastern Time, Stephen A. Smith will be here. We'll get his take on the Ray Rice suspension. Other guests this morning presented by Progressive Insurance, Mike Smith at 8 o'clock Eastern, David Shaw of Stanford, also Steve Sarkisian, the new head coach at USC. They're on campus today. It's been a great week. The SEC coaches have been here, the Big 12 coaches have been here, and the Pac-12 coaches are on campus today. Yesterday I got to meet Charlie Weiss, by the way.
Did you?
I'm a big Kansas fan.
Right.
I know we don't have a great football program, but it was cool to meet him. He's the head coach in Lawrence now. So that was cool.
So that was cool for you?
Yeah. And I got to hang out with Nelly, so that was cool.
I got to meet Nelly.
Did
you know what I told him?
What'd you tell him?
I said, one day, just lay on the couch, take a day off, eat a burger. I can show you how to do it.
He was shredded, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Absolutely yoked. I liked having a really, really big star. I know he was on the show yesterday here at Mike and Mike, he was actually in the New York area. We know he's a big rap artist, and he's got a lot of different things going on.
Sure.
But he just called and said, hey, I'm going to be in the area. Can I come up and talk sports? I thought that was cool. He wasn't here promoting anything. He wasn't here pushing anything. He was just here because he loves to talk sports as an entertainer. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and you know what, I don't know him from Adam, but I met him yesterday, and he couldn't have been more gracious. And I always look at how guys treat, there was a sign in the Broncos training room. I used to read it every morning. I'd come in 5 o'clock in the morning to do rehab for my knees and my back and whatever else was bothering me at the time. And every morning I'd grab a cup of coffee, and I would come in, and I would make it a point to read this sign because I try to live my life this way. And the sign said, you can easily judge the character of a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. And I always thought, well, that's the kind of person I want to be. You can easily judge the character of a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. And I watched Nelly be so kind and gracious to everybody here behind the scenes. You know, it's one thing to be gracious and kind to me and give me a hug and all that, but all the people that wired him up, mic'd him up, he was just kind of loving on everybody. And I said, that to me that says a lot about that man's character and who he is. So,
no doubt.
Kudos to him.
No doubt about it. Quickly, Sports Center here on Mike and Mike. The A's rout the Astros 13-1. Brandon Moss, another grand slam, his third of the season. The Tigers beat the Angels 6-4. Max Scherzer, he's won his last 4 decisions. And the Cavs have signed their overall top pick, Andrew Wiggins. He cannot be traded now for at least 30 days. We'll, of course, ask Stephen A. about that coming up at 7:10 Eastern Time. We've been discussing Stink a lot, the Josh Gordon situation, and whether or not the Cleveland Browns should stand by him, should they cut him to try and teach him some sort of a lesson. And there's been people that have had opinions both ways. Mm-hmm. The 49ers did not cut Aldon Smith when they very easily could have for a lot of his issues that he's had the last year to 18 months. He came out yesterday, said that he's going to meet with the commissioner in New York in the very near future, but that he has been sober since last September, when, remember, he was basically sent away to rehab. He missed several games, and this is an all-time type of talent. And it looks like, at least from his quotes, everything's about growth. I just keep growing. This process has been a growing process, and I'm in a better spot than I have been. If this comes out where he ends up on the other side and he becomes the all-pro that he's already been consistently for the next 7 to 10 years, maybe this will be the example we need to look to when we talk about guys like Josh Gordon.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there are so many programs available to players. I think the problem that most players have, Coach, is there's a disconnect, a mistrust between organizations in the league and the players. They don't trust taking advantage of those programs because then all of a sudden everybody in that facility and everybody in the league knows your issues and your personal demons. So guys, and this league is a kind of a machismo place where you don't want to admit that you need help. And that's just not the league, but that's a guy issue in general. Come on, none of us want to pull over to ask for directions, for crying out loud. You're right. We certainly don't want to walk in and say, "Man, I got a problem. I got an issue. I've got a dependency issue. I've got whatever the issue is. I need help." Nobody wants to do that. Heck, the NFL has provided, and different teams have provided cab service if you're out drinking. Well, no guy wants to grab the cab and have the bill come back to the team at 2:00 in the morning on Thursday when you got practice on Friday, or Friday night when you got a game on Sunday. They don't want the league to know about that. That's why you see. That's why you see all these
guys get the DUIs
and everything else, because there's this disconnect between the league and the players, and the teams and the players. And it would be nice if the players could trust. But in the NFL, without guaranteed contracts, without all those things, that will always be a stumbling block in the NFL. Guys don't want to ask for help.
And it's amazing that it's that way, but it truly is that way. But if Josh Gordon, who's going to appeal on August 1st, and he walks in there and he says, "I'm willing to go to rehab, I'm willing to get help," and he disappears for 6 months because he's going to face this suspension anyway, in all likelihood, wouldn't that be the best thing for him if the Cleveland Browns stand beside him instead of cut him in that instance, if that's what he decides to do, like what Aldon Smith was willing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I also think there's an issue with guys who have dependency issues, who get suspended because of those things. I always feel like, once you get suspended, you're not allowed to be in the facility anymore. And I always thought that was a huge mistake. Like, shouldn't those guys be in the facility? Shouldn't you have help within that facility? Shouldn't they still be a part of that team as opposed to feeling like pariahs? Shouldn't you have some type of monitoring system on that aspect of it? So that was always something that bothered me about the way the league dealt with this stuff anyhow. But here's the main point. When it comes to Aldon Smith or when it comes to Josh Gordon, it's all about distractions. And we hear it all the time in regards to Tim Tebow can't get a job right now in the National Football League because everybody talks about the distraction. When the talent outweighs the potential for distraction, guess what? They're going to stand by your side. That's how the NFL works. And another reason there's mistrust. When the talent no longer outweighs the distraction, you know what?
They're going to go away.
You'll be the sacrificial lamb. We're going to make a stand here, and we're not going to tolerate this in our organization. And that's how the NFL operates with its players, because there are no guaranteed contracts.
And so if that's the case, then Josh Gordon should be a Cleveland Brown next year if he does all the right things. If that's the case.
100%.
Because his talent is right up there. He's a top 5 talent as far as wide receivers is concerned. All right, great. Coming up, what do Michael Vick and Tim Tebow have in common? Might be more than you think. We'll discuss next. Stinking the coach, and for the guys, it's Mike and Mike. Coach Stinking for the guys this morning on a Friday. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here on ESPN Radio, ESPN2. You can get a hold of us on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at Mike and Mike, at the Coach ESPN. What's your Twitter handle?
At Mark Schlereth, SCHLERETH.
There you go. Stephen A. Smith in 10 minutes right here live on the program. Fill in the blank. Val Biz is in the house. She'll be here bottom of the hour, 7:30 Eastern time. But I wanted to start the hour with this, Stink. And maybe I'm a Michael Vick apologist. I've always been a big fan of his talents on the field. Mm-hmm. And some of my favorite athletes I get criticized for because they may have had off-the-field indiscretions. Like Tiger Woods is my favorite athlete of all time. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Michael Vick clearly has had his issues, but he has rebounded nicely and had the last several years have been a model citizen by all accounts. But his career is on the back end, wouldn't you say? He left Philadelphia, he's now with the Jets, and Rex Ryan says that Geno Smith is the guy going into camp.
Right.
I find that very hard to believe, but let's assume that's the case.
All right. All things being equal, if there is a battle right now, they say that Geno Smith is the incumbent. He's the starter going forward. We'll see exactly how that plays out. I believe competition is great, but right now, that's the move they're trying to make. Geno Smith being the guy.
That's exactly right. So, Mike Tannenbaum, who was the Jets GM from 2006 to 2012, he came out yesterday and he said this about Michael Vick. I think the Vick signing makes sense on a couple other levels. One, Michael Vick's been to the highs and the lows in the NFL, and that wisdom and experience is important. That's so valuable that he can pass along to Geno Smith. But there's another part that I know is really important to Rex Ryan, which is Michael Vick's going to play this year. He likes when the ball is in the hands of the quarterback that can make plays either throwing or running. And it may be 5 plays one game, it may be 25 another game, but he is going to put pressure on the defense by giving the ball to a quarterback that can make plays with his feet, and then goes on to basically say he'll have a Tim Tebow type role with the Jets. And I never thought in a million years that I would hear Michael Vick and Tim Tebow as far as on the field game in the same sentence.
You know, it's interesting. Are they going to unleash that great Tebow package, that super secret package where they run it into the middle of the line of scrimmage 3 times in a row with Michael Vick and then punt? Do you think that package will be released? Lord have mercy. I am not. You pay a starting quarterback to do what? To be a starting quarterback, right? And I always looked at this like, the development of a young quarterback, if they do this with Michael Vick, first off, to me, it's demeaning to Michael Vick and what he's been able to accomplish throughout his career. Secondly, do you think that Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and I know they've earned the right, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers can go, yeah, let me come off the football field. Even as young players, man, you want those reps.
Right.
You want those reps. You want to be the guy. And what does it say to you as a starting quarterback? Sit down for a minute because you're not good at this. And my thought process is that retards the development of your young quarterback who you're saying you want to be your starter. There's a rhythm. There's a rhythm to offense. I have been in this situation where we've used multiple quarterbacks because of injuries or whatever. I am telling you, there are some guys, just even something as simple as the cadence. The cadence is so rhythmic. And the only advantage you have as an offensive player is cadence. Think about it. Okay, I'm an offensive lineman. I'm fat. I'm out of shape, right? The only advantage, okay, the guys on the other side of the line of scrimmage are better athletes than I am. They're slim, they're cut, they're muscular, they can run, they can dip, they can turn, they can twirl, right? Those defensive linemen, those linebackers. I'm fat, I'm out of shape, I'm broken, and I'm injured. The only advantage I have is snap count, is cadence. Now all of a sudden you're running different guys in that have a different rhythm, a different cadence. It takes away the one advantage as an offensive lineman that I have. And it comes down to simple things like, you get one guy that comes in there and his cadence sounds like this. Blue 80! Blue 80! Hot! The next guy comes in and goes, Blue 80! Blue 80! Hot! And that...
Wow, I see the difference.
So it gets you to the point where now instead of you... Because when it's on 2, right, I'm going on 1. That's how we operate. Because we want to come a rolling start. So you going, Blue 80! Blue 80! Hut! And when you hear that first hut, you know the hut is coming. Right. So as soon as you hear the first hut, man, you're rolling. Even though it's on 2, you're rolling on 1.
It's so quick.
That's how how we operate. But now all of a sudden, if you get a hut, right?
False start.
I'm a false start. And that takes the rhythm of an offense away just from a cadence standpoint. And it drove me crazy. There was a couple guys I played with, and I love the guy. There was one guy in particular I played with. I love the guy. I hated, and he was an all-pro at one point. I hated playing with him behind me. Hated it.
Because of the cadence.
His cadence was so bad, and it changed constantly that there was never a rhythm to our offense when he played.
Wow.
You want me to tell you his name?
I think everybody wants to know his name.
Chris Miller.
I forgot that he was an All-Pro at one point.
With the Falcons he was.
Wow. Yeah,
but he played with us in Denver. One of the great guys, very talented. Hated his cadence. Had a horrible cadence, for me personally, horrible cadence. And it really threw the rhythm of our offense off. Great, like I said, great guy, really good quarterback, very smart, had some head injury issues. That's what ended his career. He finished up with us in Denver, but played some games, and his cadence was just so different from everybody else's. You could never get into a great rhythm coming off the ball.
Okay, so we've got the cadence. Coach is thinking for the guys, Mike and Mike here on ESPN Radio, ESPN2. Stephen A. Smith in about 4 minutes. So you've got the cadence issue. But if you're comparing Michael Vick to how Tim Tebow was used, it made sense because Tebow was big, he was strong, he could take it from the 2 and dive into the end zone. Michael Vick is not that type of a player. So would it make any sense to bring him in on the 10 or the 5 and run a package for him? I think I would trust Michael Vick more.
Sure.
But there is no way I would ever think for a second that the Jets or any other football team would have Geno Smith and Michael Vick, and when they get inside the 10, then here comes Michael Vick.
Yeah, as just for the reasons I told you, it would drive me crazy. And as a competitor, I think it would drive Geno Smith crazy. Like, so you're telling me I'm good enough between the 10s, but when we get into the 10s, I'm not good enough? I think it just sends a bad message as a football team. And I get it. You know, you look at Michael Vick. Heck, Michael Vick was running read option stuff back when Greg Knapp was his offensive coordinator in the early 2000s, before anybody else even knew what it was. And they put that read option stuff in where they optioned off the defensive end. They left him unblocked because Michael Vick was such a talent. And then, after 2 weeks of that, they put in a play action on it. They were way ahead of the curve. That stuff was going on in 2000 with Michael Vick. He was really, in my mind, and maybe it could have happened in the 40s and the 50s, where I'm not familiar with it, or the 60s, but that was the first guy to really run that. Then it went away because Michael Vick and the injury issues, and then obviously with the legal troubles and the dogfighting stuff that he got into, that has gone away. And then it became the in vogue thing to do again here recently. And we saw that, we've seen this NFL kind of expand. Had Art Briles on my show last night, Sedano and Stink, 7 to 10 Eastern, and he talked about the fact that a high school game has actually influenced the college game, which has now influenced the professional game. The trickle-up theory, as opposed to Reaganomics, the trickle-down theory, that high school has had an effect on the professional game, which I thought was very interesting, but probably true.
It probably is very true. Coming up in 1 minute, ESPN New York, Stephen A. Smith. We're going to ask him about the whole Michael Vick situation going on in New York. We'll do that coming up. But first, wherever the roads take you, choose Goodyear for superior performance. On and off the road, Goodyear is constantly making improvements to deliver superior performance tires. Everything Goodyear is learned making tires for all-star performance inspires what they roll into yours. Goodyear is constantly testing, innovating, and looking for ways to improve upon your ride. Exclusive tire supplier of NASCAR. If Goodyear can make a tire for police officers, firefighters, and even airliners, they have a tire that's right for you. Goodyear, chosen by those who use the world as their proving ground. Just something to consider when you're choosing tires for yourself. Goodyear, more driven. All right, we will get Stephen A. Smith in here momentarily, as we were just getting him hooked up here in a second. We're going to ask him about Michael Vick. Also, a lot of reaction on Twitter this morning. If you're just getting up, just joining us on the Ray Rice situation, just a 2-game suspension for his situation in the Atlantic City casino with his now wife. Most reaction we're getting, including yours, Stink, is that it was not enough, that it should have been more games for the commissioner to send a message about domestic violence as a whole. That was your take.
Right,
today.
and Stephen Smith always has a great take on all this stuff, and he's always dialed into everything. Plus, we'll be able to ask him about what the Andrew Wiggins signing means in Cleveland, and kind of the state of the NBA, because he is certainly an insider that talks to all the NBA people. So always interested on his take on the NBA and where exactly we're going.
Okay, let's bring him in right now. Stephen A. Smith
Fellas,
in studio. What's up, man?
What's going on, y'all?
It's great to have you in this morning,
It's great
sir.
to be in. What's up, y'all?
It's good to see you again. We fought a little bit on First Take. Normally
You
we
did.
always
I saw you
agree
yesterday.
on everything, but it's always good to be on your show and have you as a presence
Well,
here.
I was proud to disagree with you once because you're usually educating me on the sport of football, and I always appreciate that. But every now and then, I do have to remind y'all, I have been a journalist for over 20 years, so I gotta interrogate you a little bit. But I love your First Take, man. Anytime,
Thank you.
you know that.
Awesome. We were just talking about Michael Vick, Stephen.
Yes, sir.
And Mike Tannenbaum, who, of course, was the GM for several years,
Yep.
basically alluding to the fact that Michael Vick could have a Tim Tebow-type presence.
Right.
5 plays in one game, 10 plays in another.
Mm-hmm.
Could you ever see not only them using him that way, but Michael Vick allowing them to use him that way?
Well, the first order of business is a couple of things. Number one, I don't care what Mike Tannenbaum has to say. As the former general manager of the New York Jets, I'm not saying it to disrespect him. I'm saying it because I said he might as well have worked for the CIA. He's the master at saying absolutely nothing at all while still saying some things. He says nothing of consequence. He doesn't say, this man is the guy that went and said, the Mets are going to have a great season. I mean, everybody's going to have a great season. It doesn't matter what, because he just doesn't want to say anything negative. So we have to dismiss any kind of credibility because he's just not objective. Everything has to be positive instead of real. But having said all of that, is it plausible that Rex Ryan could elect to do that? Of course it is. But and Michael Vick is in no position to really flex any kind of muscle and say, I'm not going to do anything, simply because of the recent struggles that he had due to his durability constantly getting hurt and the absence of production, therefore, that came with it in Philadelphia. That's what ultimately gave Nick Foles the chance to come in the game, throw 27 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions, and guide the Philadelphia Eagles back to the playoffs. So Michael Vick understands this. I know him well. We've spoken on many occasions. As a matter of fact, he did the interview with me the day he signed with the New York Jets. And one of the things he said is that he's a team player. He's going to compete, but at the same time, he's there to help Geno Smith as well. He understands his role, and give Michael Vick credit. He's a grown-up. He's going to do whatever it takes to help the team win. I just don't think that's going to be the role. They're going to make a decision between him and Geno. It's not going to be one of those things where he's utilized like he's Tim Tebow.
We spent a lot of time today talking about this Ray Rice decision, the commissioner finding him 2 games, and I frankly just thought it wasn't enough. You had an opportunity to send a message to the whole National Football League about domestic violence, and I know we didn't see everything that went on in the elevator, and I know that Ray Rice has shown contrition. I know all these things but I've seen that video, and I just thought that, I just thought that 2 games wasn't enough to send a message, especially, when you're considering you're trying as a business to grow this business, especially on the fringe, especially with the female audience, all of the things that we do in October, with the pink jerseys and the pink and the Susan B. Komen and the breast cancer awareness and all those wonderful things that the National Football League does. I thought Roger Goodell dropped the ball. What say you?
Well, first of all, let me say this. We talked about this yesterday on First Take. You and I didn't disagree. I get where you're coming from. I just didn't have a problem with the 2 games, but I didn't disagree with your assertion that it should have been more. I want to be clear about that. Anytime domestic violence is involved, you've got to handle that business. I was raised by 5 women, 4 older sisters. You understand? I have 8 nieces. I'm a father. Let me tell you something right now. You don't put your hands on a woman, and if you do, you need to be dealt with. There's no question about that, and we're not going to advocate that by any stretch of the imagination, but we have to take into account the fact that there are things that went on in that elevator that the police say they saw, that, hotel security provided them, or whatever the case may be, wherever they were, and the commissioner and the league office saw. So they are things that we haven't seen. Obviously, you have to send a message and you have to send a statement. My man Ryan Rucco and I were talking about this yesterday, and he was along the same line as you, Stink, where you're saying you got to take this opportunity to send a message. I do understand that. But when you have no history whatsoever, when you show the appropriate level of contrition, when the fiance has now become the wife, when the families are actively involved, both of their parents were at the press conference, when they're talking about how this is being addressed, and every indication is that it was an aberration. Plus, we don't know what level of provocation involved in terms of how he was being hit, et cetera, et cetera. That's one of the things that we don't talk about enough in the society, how dudes get struck, too, and they got to just stand there and get punched in the face and stuff like that. You got a problem. Now, again, you don't want to ever advocate putting your hands on a woman because there's never an excuse for that. But there are always circumstances that need to be articulated, and I think we're living in a society today, and we understand why, because domestic violence is a very prevalent issue in our society, and it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. However, we live in a society where we hear a man and a woman got into a fight. Automatically the dude is wrong, and that's that. And I'm saying you are wrong for putting your hands on a woman. You do need to be dealt with. But one of the things that also needs to be broached are the circumstances surrounding it, because when we're not willing to delve into those circumstances, then it can give some women out there the impression that you can do whatever you want to do to a guy because all anybody is going to ask is about the role a guy played instead of the role you played as well. So if we're going to put it all out there, let's put it all out there, not just half the story on the male side. We know he's wrong. We get that. But how wrong were you? Roger Goodell, the commissioner, and the police shouldn't be the only people who know specifically what role she played too.
We're talking to Stephen A. Smith. This is Subway Fresh Take here in studio today on Mike and Mike. Andrew Wiggins just was signed yesterday by the Cavs, which means now, per NBA rules, he can't be traded for 30 days. We spent so much time on all of your first take on this.
I want to know how much time we got, because I got information for you, and I want to break it down to you. How much time we got?
We got about 4 minutes.
All right, let's go.
Okay, so tell me why they signed him, what it means. Go.
First of all, it means nothing. You had to get him signed because he has to be a part of the trade. Had you not signed Andrew Wiggins, but you had traded him to Minnesota, then they just would have had his rights, and you still would have had to make up the $5.5 million that you're paying him to include in any kind of potential trade for Kevin Love. And that $5.5 million wouldn't have been included in it because you hadn't had him signed yet. You have to remember that the salaries have to fall within 75% of one another or more in order to consummate the deal. That's point number one. But point number two, and more importantly, I don't understand why this has been that big of a deal, because in my estimation, the Minnesota Timberwolves shouldn't be thinking about this trade. We're just learning that Anthony Bennett, last year's #1 overall pick, could actually play. From November to March, we didn't know he could play because the boy looked like a flat-out scrub. Now, in the last month of the season, he got considerably better. So we were happy about that and say, oh, that's the dude out of UNLV from Canada. That was the #1 pick. Okay, he could play a little bit. Andrew Wiggins, tremendous promise, no doubt about that. But suspect handle, suspect jump shot. You look at Kevin Love, 26-12 in the Western Conference as a #1 option. I understand they haven't made the playoffs, but Kevin Love is big time. I'm sorry, I don't want to hear about Anthony Wiggins, Bennett, and a #1 pick for Kevin Love. If you're Minnesota, you have to get more. And you have to remember that there was noise that Golden State put on the table. Klay Thompson, Harrison Barnes, David Lee were willing to take back the contract of Kevin Martin, and all they asked for was an additional number 13 overall pick in this past draft. Minnesota balked. Flip Saunders should not have balked at that compared to what he's got on the table. I'm sorry. So, yeah, it's possible that this could happen. And from what my sources told me just yesterday, and I don't know whether this is true or not, so I haven't got it locked down, but I'm hearing that Kevin Love is basically telling other teams, don't bother bringing me long term, because once my contract is up, if I have to serve this last year in Minnesota, I'm going to Cleveland. The man apparently wants to play with LeBron James. So that could have a lot to do with why this seems so imminent, because when you're a star the magnitude of a Kevin Love and you made it very clear you don't want to stay where you are, then they've got to figure out something when you're telling them where you want to go.
Gut feeling. Is he eventually a Cleveland Cavalier
I think
this year?
It appears that he's eventually a Cleveland Cavalier, because to me it makes no sense.
This coming season.
Yeah, because to me it makes no sense why Minnesota didn't pull the trigger on the deal for Golden State.
Right.
Klay Thompson, 6'6", 6'7". He can guard three positions: the point guard, the shooting guard, the small forward. He's a sharpshooter alongside Steph Curry. He causes matchup problems at three different positions. The brother can play. So for me, how do you not get it? And all of this stuff about, Klay Thompson wasn't a part of the deal. That may have been last week, but last month he was. I don't care what they say. I know what my sources in Golden State tell me. I'm telling you. I'm not asking. Klay Thompson, Minnesota had an opportunity to get their hands on him, and flip-flopped on that. And that's a problem.
We got 1 minute left. as we go into this year, and if this plays out and Kevin Love does go to Cleveland, at the start of the year, Game 1, are they, in your mind, the best team in the East?
If Kevin Love is in Cleveland?
Correct.
Yes. No question. Next question.
Well, that was the last one I had.
I was just going to ask you, where do you think Miami is in 30 seconds? Where do you think Miami is now with LeBron being gone, kind of what they have?
Miami is in the mix. Dwayne Wade is losing weight on that paleo diet. He's on a mission because his role that he had prior to LeBron James' arrival will be resumed. He's ready to go, even though he's getting married next month. He's hyped about this upcoming season. I'm hearing he's already lost 8 to 10 pounds.
Wow.
He's trying to lose about 20 because they told him by losing the weight, he has no cartilage in his knee, by losing the weight, it's going to help him endure the rigorous season that is forthcoming. But he's on a mission because he knows that people are counting them out. He also knows that, in part, it may have played the role in why LeBron James left. Dwayne Wade is not typical Dwayne Wade right now. He has an attitude. And when he has an attitude, look out.
Boy, that'd be fun.
His health is an issue for me. But a healthy Dwayne Wade is a superstar in this league. And if he's healthy, y'all better buckle up.
That would be fun. Luol Deng, Chris Bosh, they're not going to be as bad as people think. Stephen A., as always, brother, we love talking to you, man.
No doubt.
All right, ESPN New York's Stephen A. Smith. You can see him on First Take this morning, 10 a.m. Eastern to noon.
Don't miss it today.
It's going to be a good one today.
Got some good stuff going on today.
This is Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Now you can test drive Snapshot, even if you have insurance with another company. See how much you can save before you switch. The chatter line is open, 740-535-6453. Let us know about the Ray Rice. Do you agree with Stephen A.? Is Cleveland clearly going to be the number one team in the East if they get Kevin Love? Coming up next, we'll discuss the state of the Clippers, Ray Rice's suspension, and Tony Romo saying the best is yet to come with the Dallas Cowboys. We go fill in the blank next. Coach and Stink in for the guys. It's Mike and Mike. Line that is open, 740-535-6453. And Stink, a lot of people weighing in there on what they think should happen with Ray Rice.
The Mike and Mike chatter line.
Yeah, if you really want to make a dent in domestic violence and send a message to the rest of the league, it should have been 8 games right off the bat and then reduce from there based on the facts of the case.
Yeah, and that's basically exactly what I have been saying from the word go. I told you I thought it should have been a minimum of 8 games, and then if you wanted to say, okay, but he's done. He's been above board. He's shown contrition. They came in. They talked to me as the commissioner. They've gone through all the steps. There were extenuating circumstances, blah, blah, blah. All right, maybe I rescind 2 games and make it a 6-game suspension, or at the very least a 4-game suspension. But a 2-game suspension, to me, you missed the boat. And as I said earlier, only where, in the NFL, only where an alleged punch to the face can lead to a slap on the wrist. And that's a slap on the wrist based upon some of the other fines that have been doled out for football field, on-field issues. Helmet-to-helmet hits, game suspension here, game suspension there. McCoy, you remember Colt McCoy getting hit by James Harrison, get a 1-game suspension. They're checking his wrist on the sideline. He's got a concussion. They send him back to the game. I don't remember the Cleveland Browns being fined for that, for not adhering to NFL rules. But here you go. Harrison gets a $100,000 fine or whatever it was. He got a game suspension, and Ndamukong Suh stomps on Evan Dietrich Smith's arm in a Thanksgiving Day game. It's fairly innocuous. Evan Dietrich Smith had been cutting him. He'd been on his legs. He'd been down there. The frustration boils over in-game. That's an in-game kind of, the passion of playing football. He stomps on his arm. It's not even that big a deal. He gets a 2-game suspension. You're telling me you're looking at those things the same? Then in my mind, Roger Goodell, you've got screws loose.
All right, well,
you missed an opportunity to really send a message. That's how I felt about it.
Okay, in 10 minutes, plenty more reaction on Ray Rice. We'll hear from his teammates. Just a lot of people around the league are weighing in on this. Also, the channel line is just filling up as quickly as we can take the calls. 740-535-6453. We'll play more of those on whether or not you think Ray Rice and the suspension is enough. 2 games. But right now, let's bring in to our left. The lovely Val Biz is here today. How are you, my dear?
I'm well. Thank you guys for having me.
We love having you. Are you ready to play a little fill in the blank?
Okay, so sticking with the Ray Rice theme, give me one word. The NFL suspension of Ray Rice is blank.
Go ahead.
Light. It should have been more. You should have sent a message. You just from a business perspective, as smart as the National Football League is when it comes to business and creating opportunities for themselves to make more money, you have missed the boat on this one. The fringe fan, the female audience that you're trying to grow on a year-to-year basis, all the Susan B. Komen stuff and the pink uniforms all through October. It's a great marketing ploy. It's a great opportunity for business. And yet here you are dealing with domestic violence, and you're basically slapping somebody on the wrist. Regardless of what the circumstances are, regardless of the apologies, I believe you missed the boat.
My fill in the blank is it's questionable, and I don't think as strongly as Stink does, because if I saw what happened inside the elevator, then I probably would. But since I haven't, I don't want to go there. But he's absolutely entitled to his opinion and how he feels about it. Everybody feels differently. It's a very emotional topic for a lot of people. But right now, it's questionable because I think it probably should be more. But they've seen the video. I haven't, so I have to go with what they say. To me, it's questionable.
Can I fill in the blank?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
As a female, I found it very disappointing. So that's just my opinion. I thought you guys made a good point. Terrell Pryor got 5 games for exchanging memorabilia for free tattoos in college, and then this is a 2-game suspension. So
yeah.
I found it very disappointing.
It's a good,
I think most people across the nation feel exactly that way. Just disappointing. You missed an opportunity to really send a message.
Yeah, and I know we don't know what happened in the video, but, I looked it up. Ray Rice weighs 206 pounds. She was knocked out cold. It was a chilling video, It's disappointing it happened, and then I don't feel like the suspension was an appropriate response.
And I guess if you look at it from the other way, if we're being completely objective, which is our job, if it would have been 6 or 8 games, I don't think anybody, at least publicly, you'd have very few people that would have a problem with it. Am I right?
I think you're 100% correct.
So you wonder if it should have been more just from that perspective. But Ray Rice also has to be dealt with fairly, and that's what Roger Goodell's job is, not ours. Go ahead. True. Next.
Okay, Tony La Russa saying he can see PED users in the Hall of Fame with an asterisk is blank.
Correct.
Okay.
I've always believed that. Major League Baseball knew what was going on within their sport, but they wanted their sport back. They wanted their sport to be popular. They basically encouraged, and I mean it, they encouraged the use of PEDs by their players because why? Because the players who were using, and everybody knew who they were, inside the walls of Major League Baseball were getting paid. And so they were getting an unfair advantage, and so other guys were encouraged to use so they could get paid as well. And then they act as though, they turned a blind eye to what was going on within the walls of their own game. They turned a blind eye to it, and then when it became exposed publicly, they acted astonished that this went on.
Like it was going on.
It's so hypocritical. And Tony La Russa, by the way, Tony La Russa is going to the Hall of Fame. Is he going to have an asterisk by his name? Because you know what, one of the big power hitters on that team that is a alleged PED user, Mark McGwire.
Well, and Jose Canseco back in the day.
Right, exactly. But you use those guys to get a majority of those 2,000 plus odd wins, whatever you have. Should we put an asterisk by his name? Why do we not judge him the same as we judge the players? The players should get in because they deserve to get in. It's unfortunate that's what was going on, but it's what went on at that time.
And it doesn't take away from the talent that these players had. It enhances the talent a little bit. And my fill in the blank is it's forward thinking on his part, because these are Barry Bonds was a Hall of Fame player prior to the years where he really bulked up and really it looked like he was using, even though technically he's never had the positive test. But to me, it's forward thinking. But these guys deserve to be in the Hall of Fame for their talent, because it's about the fans. And the fans proved this year when they voted in Nelson Cruz that they really don't care about PED use in baseball. They want to be entertained. And if you're a Hall of Fame talent entertainer, you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. That's all the time we have time for right now. The Hub is, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you can always weigh in. You don't have to ask.
Yeah. Well, I was going to anyway, so I just thought I'd be polite about it.
If we would have said no, you'd have said no. Well, tough.
Yeah, let me go ahead. Yeah.
There you go. All right, so that's fill in the blank here on Mike and Mike. Coming up next, plenty more reaction. We've got the chatter line wide open. We've got Twitter going crazy. The Ray Rice suspension, what will it open up as far as suspensions going forward? We'll discuss that next. Coach Stink in for the guys. Okay, welcome back. Sports Center here on Mike and Mike. The A's, the Major League Baseball leading A's, rout the Astros 13-1. Brandon Moss, another grand slam, number 3 on the year. He leads the majors in that category. Tigers beat the Angels 6-4. Max Scherzer, 7 innings, 11 strikeouts. He's won his last 4 decisions. And the Cavs have signed their number 1 overall pick, Andrew Wiggins, to a contract, so he is locked and loaded. That Sports Center, also fill in the blank, was brought to you by Mobile Super. Choose Mobile Super for long engine life. A Stink and the coach in for the guys is Mike and Mike. Coming up at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, top of the hour, Falcons head coach Mike Smith will be here. Bob Holtzman, bottom of the hour. He's with the Browns. It's going to be anxious. I'm going to be anxious to see what kind of a turnout the Browns get training camp with Johnny Manziel now in the mix there. But the Ravens are the team right now that are front and center, Stink, because of this whole Ray Rice situation. We knew the suspension was coming. Jamison Hensley was on the show earlier today, and he said they were bracing for a 4-game suspension. And I think maybe if it would have been 4, maybe this discussion wouldn't be a discussion because people would have been saying, you know what, we didn't see what happened in the elevator. 4 games is pretty stiff. He's going to miss a quarter of the season. Now it's just an eighth of the season. I think that's where people are having an issue today.
I don't think there's any question that people are having an issue. I mean, the majority of people are on the side that I am on, and that side is you had an opportunity as the National Football League to really send a message about how you feel about domestic violence. And based on some of the fines that you have levied and some of the suspensions that you have levied, there doesn't seem to be equity in this particular one. And I know we didn't see everything that went on in that elevator. We didn't see everything from a video standpoint. But again, it's about a business decision. I mean, you know, that to me is kind of the bottom line. And you miss that opportunity to send a very strong message throughout this league that it will not be tolerated. And we've talked about some of the suspensions, and one that seems to be resonating with a lot of people is Terrell Pryor trades memorabilia, jerseys and T-shirts and things of that nature while he's at Ohio State for tattoos. And he comes in and has to serve a 5-game suspension for trading stuff that's his, that he owns. Mm-hmm. His own personal memorabilia gets a 5-game suspension. And yet, domestic violence is treated with a 2-game suspension. You're trying to grow your sport. You're trying to grow revenues. You're trying to get fringe fans to become fanatics. And those fringe fans, in many cases, are the female audience. And you basically, in many of their minds, disrespected them by basically poo-pooing, if you will, the importance.
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
Of domestic violence. And I just, you missed an opportunity to send a very strong message. I thought it should have been 8 games, and then maybe you negotiate it down to 6. But I thought it'd be, at a minimum, based upon some of the other fines you've levied during the course of your commissionership, I just thought you totally missed the boat on this.
All right, a lot of response on Twitter as well. Gareth Lindo says, guys, imagine how the Jay-Z Solange video would have been different without the bodyguard. Maybe Rice just pushed her off. That's Mike and Mike, reminding you that if you want to get in touch with us, you can tweet us at Mike and Mike through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, or even just because, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN for special deals on flowers and gifts starting at $29.99. As I mentioned, a lot of different people having their thoughts and opinions on this situation, including Keith Olbermann.
You don't call someone who works as a football sideline reporter the B word. You don't say that the Wimbledon women's champ is never going to be a looker. You don't take apart a 16-year-old Olympic star for her hairstyle. You don't ask a winner at the Australian Open who her dream date is. You don't tweet that watching football with women is worse than death and hashtag it, these hoes ain't loyal. And why you don't say a linebacker looks like Tarzan but plays like Jane. You don't do that. You don't do any of that. Because by some tiny amount, each one of those things lowers the level of basic human respect for women in sports. And sooner or later, there are so many tiny amounts that the level of basic human respect is gone altogether. And eventually, after all the B words and ho comments and penis remarks and nudity demands and waitress jokes, the most powerful national sports league in the world can then get away with suspending a wife beater for just 2 games. In 2006, when Albert Haynesworth of the Tennessee Titans stomped on the head of a center for the Dallas Cowboys, the National Football League suspended Haynesworth for 5 games. It was a despicable and dangerous act, but it was during a game, during a play that was part of a violent sport. And though the victim's helmet had come off, he was still wearing pounds of protective gear. Haynesworth, 5 games. Ray Rice, 2 games. The National Football League's concern for Janae Palmer-Rice is slightly less than the concern for her that Ray Rice showed on that tape. The message to the women who the league claims constitute 50% of its fan base is simple. The NFL wants your money. It will do nothing else for you. It will tolerate those who abuse you verbally and those who abuse you physically. And its elder statesmen will talk about the media distractions that could ensue because one of the NFL's gay active players has finally self-identified, without saying a word about the media distractions that could ensue because a star player has knocked out his wife and gotten only 2/5 the punishment another player got for giving an opponent a 30-stitch cut during a game. And it brings it all full circle. You can call women reporters and women athletes terrible names, names that the men who just used them would throw a punch over if those names had been directed at their wives or mothers. And another generation of athletes and fans begin to view the women in sports as just a little less human than the men. And then one of them raised in that environment beats the crap out of his wife. And the message from the National Football League is, that'll get you banned for 2 whole games. Go smoke pot recreationally, and that may get you suspended for a year.
Okay, that was Keith Olbermann. And I know there's a certain section of the fan base stink that would love for us to be talking about what's going on in training camp, what's happening on the field, new players and whatnot. But the truth of the matter is that this is a subject matter that is bigger than sports. It goes far beyond sports. And when sports is involved, especially a star football player, it hits a nerve. And this morning, that's certainly what it's done.
It has, and you look at that, and as I've said many, many times, I just don't think it's enough. I don't think you sent a strong enough message, very much like Keith Olbermann just talked about, and he's 100% right. And I think probably if you looked at the Ravens, they would tell you, well, you know what, we get it, but we start off with 3 divisional games, and we're going to miss our best running back for 2 of those divisional games. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty stiff penalty. That's the counter argument to that they'll give out. But again, that to me pales in comparison to, the punishment does not fit the crime in my mind when it comes to domestic violence and the message you could send to the whole league. And obviously, as we talked about, the message you're sending to half the people that you call are your fans, the female audience, the majority of them are really turned off, and they should be.
All right, this is Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Now you can test drive Snapshot, even if you have insurance with another company. See how much you can save before you switch. Top of the hour, the Falcons have re-signed Roddy White to a new contract. How will his contributions put the Falcons at the top of the NFC South? Their head coach, Mike Smith, next. It's Mike and Mike.
And a good morning. It is 8:02, and we are off and running live from the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center here in sunny and pretty pleasant Richmond, Virginia on a Friday morning. Lots of dew on the grass. The grass right in front of us is, it's glistening, baby, in the sun. But that means that practice will start on time, 8:35 this morning, so now 33 minutes away from the Redskins actually officially beginning practice. Yesterday didn't start until right around 9 o'clock. But, of course, that was because of the weather. Today, again, beautiful sunny skies. If you're heading down here, do get here as early as you can, obviously. There should be a big crowd on hand with the nice weather and the full guarantee that, provided that nothing weird happens, that there'll be 2 practices today. Of course, the main practice in the morning and then the afternoon walkthrough, which isn't quite honestly as exciting. but also is a greater opportunity, I would assume, if autographs is your thing, to get better access to the players, just because I would imagine most people would come for the main practice, and who knows about who will stay around for the afternoon walkthrough. That being said, our guy John Kahn from ESPN.com is in the house, ready to go. Is that a little coffee you're sipping on there, Kicks?
It's day 2. I need the coffee. I think you forgot to leave out that it's easier to get your autograph in the afternoon, too.
Well, that is true.
You're on the air all morning, so people don't have a chance to get you kind of secluded in this tent.
Right.
People can't get to you.
That is true.
You need to be a man of the people, and that's the afternoon. So if you want Chris Russell's autograph, come for the walkthrough.
Well, what I'm trying to do is have Pat Malley as my personal protector. Like on punt plays, they have the punt protector, the personal protector. Pat Malley is kind of like that guy. He's going to escort me around the facility and make sure that none of the 9 to 5 ham and eggers get their their hands on me.
That stack of photos of yourself there that ready to hand out is pretty good too.
Well,
a little presumptuous,
I just had a personal photographer, my buddy Ed Sheehan, who does Ed, my first year on the beat in 2009 was my only friend. You didn't like me.
No,
I mean, you were like, look at this guy. And now you're
we still say that, but
right, and now you're stuck with me.
Yeah. Now I have to talk to you. We're
exactly.
On
the air. Okay. Anyway, so one day, we've been here a day and a half. It feels so far like a pretty frenetic 1 day and a half, but we've only had one full practice. And a lot happened yesterday, and you detailed a lot of it on ESPN.com, and obviously I highly suggest you guys to follow John at John_Keim, Keim, as well. Read him in ESPN.com and the NFL Nation. Just click on Washington Redskins. All of John's great work is there. You wrote about Robert. You wrote about D'Angelo Hall. And then the piece that, for me, is just a must-read any day is your practice report and what you kind of focused and what you kind of gained there from being able to watch practice yesterday. And I just wanted to start right from the get-go with you on your first line, and let's not waste any time. Robert Griffin did not look sharp Thursday morning. Now, you cite a couple of different reasons. I guess I would ask it this way. Was that pretty much what you were expecting? Because I wasn't expecting the offense to be sharp in the rain and first practice pass.
No, I wasn't. Not at all. And it's what people have to remember when you do this stuff, and you understand this too. We're just observing one practice. Yep. It's not making a grand statement or extrapolating from there to say, oh my God, he had a bad practice, he's going to have a bad year. No, that's not it at all. It's just. He was shaky. He admitted he said that, or he admitted that he was. Jay Gruden called him erratic. So we're just observing what we saw that morning, just like the coaches do. And then what you do from there is how does he progress from there? So I agree with you. I don't expect him to come out here and light it up. Now, would you like to see a better showing? Yeah, of course you would. You would like to see, even though it's rainy and all that, well, you're going to play in bad weather. So, you want to see how he handles that. But because it is the first practice, you can give reasons if you want to say this is why he struggled. Now, again, the other thing is you want to see a better showing, a little bit more consistency with his passes. Some of the deep ball stuff with Deshaun Jackson, I think you can get that worked out. I think he has to get used to throwing. We'll probably maybe talk more about that later, but get used to throwing to a guy with his speed. But more so, there were a lot of times where he wasn't getting rid of the ball. And whether it was because of protection sometimes or it's because of hesitation, that's the hard part to know because, even when you talk to the coaches, their comment is, I have to go back and watch the tape because I'm not sure what happened on that play. Is it Griffin? Is it the receivers? Is it the protection?
And that's, I guess, some of the issues with Deshaun Jackson, some of the drops, wet balls, all that stuff doesn't worry me at all. I was glad that they went through it. I was glad that they didn't say, it's rain, we don't want to. Like you said, you're going to have to play in heat. You're going to have to play in freezing cold, snow. You're going to have to play sometimes in rain. You're going to have to play at night. You're going to have to play in the day. All that. I was glad they went out with that. I discount everything as much as I possibly can. The one area that I guess you would still have to have some question. I don't know if concern is the right way, is just what you mentioned. And again, I'll just read directly from your post. More often than not, and you just alluded to it, Griffin was unable to throw the ball. Now, as you talk about, fault is tough to determine. However, that was somewhat of a problem last year.
And honestly, as a rookie,
Yes.
he left a lot of plays on the table,
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
I think people forget that, but when you go back and watch the games, as you did, and you know this, there were a lot of times where it's like there's a little hesitancy to make that throw, and he could bail himself out with his legs. And the other thing is, too, the other thing we're not seeing with Griffin right now that you can't measure are the legs, in the ability to extend plays. You're not going to see, we saw that on one play, but even on the play we did, he probably would have been sacked. So you kind of, you take it with a grain of salt there, what happens there, but we're not able to see that. And they're really working hard on developing him as a pocket passer. And so that's the other thing that you have to say, okay, how much of this is you're trying to develop him versus how much of this is what it's going to look like during the season. You can't just focus only on developing him because you have to develop the offense, but how much are you going to get him on the move and do stuff? And it's not like they did run some bootlegs, but yes, I mean, that was an issue, and that's why I agree with you. That's why you note it. Whether you can put in there, you're not going to make grand statements or judgments on where his game is at, because you do have to allow for progression. And I think to make anything just with him, because we saw what he did 2 years ago as a player, even though he had some issues there, we saw what he did 2 years ago in terms of his impact on the game. So I want to see a lot more, but I want to see the progression.
You know what's interesting? Once again, and Robert basically disputed this yesterday, and I agree with him about the whole reading defenses. That's a criticism. Oh, we're not sure if Robert can read. Fair or unfair, that's a criticism right now. And he says, well, you don't forget how to read defenses from 2012 to 2013. I have no doubt that Robert Griffin III can read defenses adequately well and can get better at that. But is there a separation in your mind between being able to decipher and read a defense and read a coverage versus knowing and having the confidence to make that split-second decision to get rid of the football where it needs to be, proper ball location, so on? There is to me.
There's definitely to me, and that it's the speed at which you're reading the defense. I don't think, and that was one of the things when you talked to, it wasn't just coaches that you talked to about this, it was other guys on the team to say, and it wasn't when I would talk to other guys, it wasn't a criticism. It was when Griffin did not come into this league as a finished product. Far from it. And even then, I think we may have talked about this yesterday, but when he came in that first year, Mike Shanahan constantly said in 3 or 4 years he's going to look back and realize how much he didn't know. And that wasn't a criticism. It was especially at that time, this is when you didn't hear anything, but this is as a rookie. So there was no stress in the relationship at that point, at least certainly none publicly, and there was no reason for Shanahan to bash him. It was I can't wait to see at that point it was I can't wait to see where this kid is at, because he is very raw and he doesn't realize how raw he is. And I would still say maybe he doesn't realize just where he has to, how much more he has to learn, because how can you? But so that's one thing in that regard. And so I think when you look at and you talk about reading, and so anyways, back to the point. Some of the players are talking about it's more so the pre-snap reads. Can you read it right now? Can you anticipate off this look? You don't even have to look at your primary guy because he's not going to be open given this look. And you would see it last year that there were times where it looked like he stayed with longer time with the guy when you say, okay, he's not getting open here. And you could see at a certain step, they got this covered. Get off there. That's where you start to see it's the progression and how quickly you're going through the progression.
Right.
Not so much
the progression within the read.
Correct. And that's where, again, it doesn't mean it's a criticism. It's a where he can improve.
Absolutely.
And that's why that's why he is not a finished product. And that's why you cannot make, again, grand judgments off of last year or anything, because he is still a developing, growing quarterback who did not play in a system in college that was, necessarily a great preparation for the NFL. It's not a knock on it. It's great in college, but it was a system when you're asked to do things in the NFL, it's different than what he was asked to do in college. He is still a developing quarterback.
All right, Robert Griffin III is expected to join us after practice, assuming practice ends before 11. If not, we'll have to figure out what happens from there. We expect practice probably at 10:30, 10:35, somewhere in that range. Don't know how hard they're going to be going much past that. So hopefully that will happen before 11 o'clock. John Keim will be with us for the rest of the hour and pop back in whenever he can. Coming up next, we will delve a little further into John's report from day one of practice. Lots to go through there. What wide receivers stood out to Mr. Keim on day one of Redskins training camp 2014? The answer might surprise you a bit, but we will get to that. 8:13 and change. ESPN 980. We're live on a beautiful 68 degrees Friday morning from the Bon Secours Washington Redskin Training Center here in Richmond. Friday, 8:17. We welcome you back, ESPN 980, as we broadcast live from Richmond, Virginia, overlooking the practice fields as the players. I think I saw Keenan Robinson trot out a couple of minutes ago, but that's pretty much the only player I've seen so far, unless I wasn't paying attention. But the players will start to stream out here as practice set to get underway at 8:35 on a beautiful sunny Friday morning. 69 degrees, heading up to a high of about 85, 86. So it should be a great day here. It's going to be real hot over the weekend. So if you're planning your trip down here, expect it to be in the mid-90s on Saturday and Sunday with, of course, plenty of humidity. John Keim, ESPN.com, is with us. Of course, you hear him all over the place here as one of our ESPN 980 Redskins insiders. Read him in the ESPN.com. Follow him at John_Keim. John, we opened up the show talking about Robert Griffin III, and okay, we'll get back to him, and Robert is expected to pop by here after practice. So, wanted to talk about a couple of other things with you. And you mentioned some of the misconnections with Deshaun Jackson. And again, timing, rhythm, all that can be worked on.
And one was on Jackson, too. He dropped it.
Absolutely. We know he has cohesion with Pierre Garçon, but even with Pierre last year, there were some frustrating moments, and Pierre, very competitive, showed some of his frustration on a number of different times. But as I read your practice report from yesterday on ESPN.com, one of the receivers that has stood out to me all offseason, and that I think you noted, was Ryan Grant.
Yeah.
I don't know how much was expected out of this guy, a fifth-round wide receiver from Tulane. I didn't know that much about him, but you plug in a tape or two and you see, okay, you start to see what they liked in him. What did you see, and why are they so high on it? And is this stuff we always do at this time of training camp?
Part of it.
And then when it gets to the games, he's invisible.
And that's we don't know, because there have been a lot of guys. I think any Redskins fan would know some receivers. Taylor Jacobs always looked pretty good in training camp.
Marco Mitchell.
No, he was. That was your guy. That guy, and there were a few things missing there. I never jumped on that. I never jumped on that bandwagon because he didn't. The things that with Ryan Grant that stand out. Yeah. There are a couple of things. One, they were high on him from the beginning.
Right.
Okay, and I talked to other coaches around the league who liked him in college and liked what they saw on tape. What turned them off was when he ran. Mm-hmm. He's not a fast guy.
Not a fast.
So so we don't know really what he's going to do. And when the more teams learn him, or when teams learn how to defend him, then it's going to be a little bit different. I don't know that he would have a big role this year, but I think he's a guy worth developing because he is such a good route runner, mm-hmm. and that's what gets them excited. That guy, he's a very savvy route runner. Very smooth route runner, understands how to attack a defensive back, was coached very well in college. I'm somebody who had been with the Saints, coached with the Saints, coached him in college, so he understands how to approach it like an NFL receiver. Now, my one thing would be, okay, that's great, but you're kind of coming into the NFL at a higher level, which is great, but where do you go from there? Would you rather have a guy who can be developed more in that area, who has greater skills? I don't know. All I know is that he runs really good routes right now, and you saw that yesterday. And some of the you know how there's the one-on-one stuff. You don't get caught up way too much in that because it's designed for the receiver to win. But when they win the way he did against, it was one time against Basad Breeland where he ran a route that you don't see rookies executing the way he did it that often. And it was just he made it look like a slant and go. Breeland plays the slant and go, turns, and just takes off downfield, and Grant cuts the outside. It's a savvy route, and he's open by 10 yards. Now, here's the thing. Eventually, teams are going to realize he's not going to beat you deep. So you're going to sit on all those routes. So we don't know how he'll be. All I know is right now he runs good routes.
Yeah, it's interesting because Jay yesterday mentioned, hey, Deshaun's got blazing speed, but we got to work on his get-offs, and he's too cool for school in some of his routes. And yet, maybe you see some of what, I don't want to say what Jay doesn't like in Deshaun, but he did point it out. And then what you're kind of talking about with Ryan Grant, and who doesn't have that long speed that, of course, Deshaun has. And it's kind of a complement of two different, and it's why they are two different people, two different wide receivers. This is why one went in the second round and one's one of the best wide receivers in the league, and why one went in the fifth round.
Sure.
And I guess further to your point, if teams start sitting on those routes when we get to preseason games and in the regular season, I wonder, and I don't know him well enough yet, I know he's a pretty good hands catcher. I know he's savvy. I know I guess I would describe it as some sneaky athleticism. I wonder, with all of the attention, if you put him out into, say, a four-receiver pack, can teams sit on just him and, you know what I'm saying? Because they're not going to be paying attention to Ryan Grant.
No, but, as a corner, if you studied your opponents, you're going to know that, okay, this guy probably not going to beat me deep. So, so even if he shows you something, you know that depending on your own speed, you know that you can probably compensate. That's the only thing. But, it may take a while for that to happen. And again, I don't want to go overboard on him. I just know that he's a very good route runner. And even like with Deshaun, it's funny because Gruden says that, and when you watch him from Philly, and you see him getting wide open because of his cuts. Now, part of it is because you have to honor so many things with him. There are certain routes he didn't run. I never saw him run a slant route last year.
Right.
And the Saints, he tried to run a slant and go against the Saints, didn't work because he never runs a slant. But in other routes, you have to honor his deep speed. So if he's running a comeback or a hitch, he's going to get open. I mean, against most guys, he's going to get open.
Because you have to understand that he can blow past you in the drop of a dime.
Correct. But I saw it on other routes too. But with Grant, if you're a really good route runner, you can still get open. It's not like speed is everything. We've seen a lot of fast guys who have failed. I think the route running will definitely help him. And I mean, he's never going to be more than a complimentary receiver, but that's okay. He's a fifth-round pick, so if he becomes a guy who's like the fourth or probably a fifth receiver or something like that, that's pretty good. But I still think he's a guy worth developing because he does have that. And I will be curious to see when he goes against better corners how that route running plays out.
Do you think that because he excels in that area that he might be better in the slot as opposed to on the outside because you can do you have a three-way go?
Because slot is as much about quickness and route running as it is about speed. And on the outside, you're going to want more speed. Right. I mean, that's why Pierre and Deshaun are outside because they have that speed. Whereas the slot receivers around the NFL are not necessarily blowing by you, which is playing speed. They're getting open because they run good routes.
Because they're crafty.
Yeah, and Santana Moss at this point is more about that than he is about speed.
I want to piggyback on just that notion about how Ryan Grant might, maybe not this year, but might be able to help the Redskins because of what you just said when we return on the other side of the bottom of the hour break and the DC Sports Center. As well, I want to get to some of your other practice thoughts and observations situations. Tom Compton, Morgan Moses, the third-round pick from the University of Virginia, as well as some of the punters. And then we're going to get to, in the bottom part of, or in the end, last part of this hour, rather, D'Angelo Hall. You had an interesting exchange. We all had some interesting exchange with D'Angelo Hall yesterday here at the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center. So all of that still to come. Plenty of time for you to get aboard, weigh in, your thoughts, 301-230-0980. You can follow and hit up John at John_Keim, K-E-I-M. As well, you can hit me up at WrestleMania 980, the radio station at ESPN Radio 980, 826 and change. We're live on a beautiful Friday morning from the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center here in sunny Richmond on the home of the Redskins. This is ESPN 980. All right, 8:33 and change. Nice to have you aboard with us on a beautiful Friday morning, live from sunny Richmond, Virginia. Overlooking the practice field, John Keim, ESPN.com. Follow him at John_Keim. Read him in ESPN.com in the Redskins NFL Nation section. Hello, Rich Tandler. How are you? Players streaming out onto the field. Practice just about to begin. See Roy Halou kind of coming on out as most of the players are already out on the field. John, wanted to hit a couple of different things, and then we'll get into D'Angelo Hall. You wrote about Tom Compton and Morgan Moses earlier or yesterday, and yeah, I think we have you now, right, John?
Am I here?
Yeah, now we got you.
I want to hear more of the song. I like that.
Well, that is a good song. You wrote about Morgan Moses and Tom Compton and some of the things that they were doing, and I think they moved Moses to the left side, which, of course, he played at the University of Virginia. Now, most people have him ticketed to be right tackle, push Tyler Columbus. Compton, we know, can play left and right. Is this just a matter of trying to get them both comfortable with both spots, because basically that swing tackle position is between Moses or Compton? Or I know we had a conversation during the offseason where they might be forced to take both Moses and Compton.
Well, listen, I think if you're taking the 10 best guys, I think Compton's in there.
Yep.
If that's how many you take.
Yep.
If that's how many you take. And if it's 9, then you have decision make. You can't cut a third-round pick. Or I guess you can. You're not going to, because that would be a massive admission of a mistake.
Yep.
And I don't think that Moses was a mistake. I don't think he's a guy who's going to come in and start. I don't think, honestly, I wouldn't play him. It would be a while before I played him, because I just don't think he's close to being ready.
Yeah.
And I think maybe they see some of that. But I do know, in talking to Chris Furster in the offseason, that unlike the past couple of years where they would take a rookie like Moses and leave him at one spot for a while. They did that with Laribas. They did that with Geddes. Now you see both those guys moving around a lot more. But this year they have tougher decisions to make. So you need to know what you have in a guy at both spots. So I think with Compton, or with Moses, you're going to see what can he do here. If something happens, can this guy come in and help us this season in this position? And if not, then you need to keep Compton. And
I think the answer is pretty obvious.
I think you need to keep Compton.
Yeah.
I really do. I haven't seen anything from Morgan Moses yet that would suggest that he certainly won't be ready by the time the season opens for that role.
Right.
It's not to say he won't be, but he's not at that point. And I think he needs to still learn how to play at his size in the NFL.
Right.
And in college, we've talked about this. In college, he would rely, when you'd watch a game tape, and this is why I never thought he was a first-round potential guy. I never bought into that. When you watch him, he was way too inconsistent, and the issues he had, I think there was, if he corrects this, yeah, sure, if he corrects that. If he had corrected that, he'd have been a first-round pick. But the problems were he has to learn to play at his height. He bends a lot at the waist, so what happens is when guys go by him in college, he could react with his long arms, pushing a guy down. In the NFL, you got to use your feet. And he's not as athletic as a Trent Williams, so he has to be able to be better in that area. He's learning how to do that. I think you have to learn how to come off the ball at that size. There were a couple times yesterday where I saw where, you try to look at how a guy sets. I try to see that and say, is it a run or a pass based on the pressure he's putting on his arm on the ground? Is it a run or a pass? I'm trying to guess that. And a lot of times you can kind of tell. And there's sometimes with him where I really couldn't tell as much because he wasn't putting as much pressure on his hand. And it's like it looks like a pass set, and then he's running, but he's not getting the push off that he needs. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So I think so he's not getting. So I think he still has to learn how to play at his size in the NFL, and that's okay. He doesn't have. They're not in a position where they have to play him. He's in a good spot for him to develop. And so when you say, I'm not saying that he'll never do anything. Just right now, he's not ready.
And I think that was their philosophy with a lot of these picks in this draft, even with the third-round pick. Even you can make the argument with the second-round pick and Trent Murphy, but make no mistake about it. They're going to play Trent Murphy a bunch this year, and Trent Murphy's going to be a factor. I mean, every coach you talk to, they love how he bends his body and just how he can maneuver. And I know you talked some about that, just the way he can kind of dip and spin.
Well, he knows how to play with his side. I mean, he's 6'5", pushing 6'6".
Yep.
There was a play yesterday where he got inside Trent Williams specifically because he knows how to play with leverage at his size. And so I think while he does not have the burst, he's not going to be this impressive guy with a burst. He's, I think with him, you're going to have to look at the totality of his game, not just an impressive play or two. And you're going to have to, it's going to be a little bit more subtle. It's the handwork. It is the leverage. He does know how to play low. And that's why I say with Moses, he has to learn how to do that. Tyler Columbus had to learn how to do that. And I still think he sometimes has to learn how to play. So you're 6'8". It's hard to do that in the NFL. There aren't a lot of guys taller than them in this league. And that's, because it's hard to play at that height. But Murphy does a really good job for a linebacker, for any player, of playing at his, knowing how to play lower.
The punting situation is one that, isn't going to get talked about on many radio shows and isn't really, something that a lot of fans probably, they might not even know who the two punters are in camp. Blake Klingon and Robert Malone. Robert Malone was with Ben Kotwika in New York. And look, at times we've seen him, and you noted this in your column, inconsistent is the problem. And both get some pretty good whacks on the ball, both get some pretty good hang time, but then there's the inconsistent moments. And that was one thing that drove, yes, towards the end of – there were times where Sav Rocca was consistently not good. But there were times where Sav Rocca was okay over the last couple of years. How can they find a punter that is consistent out of these two, or is that an impossible task at this point, and they're just basically stuck with trying to take the best out of two guys that are kind of inconsistent?
Well, I mean, if these are I don't know who's out there still to go get. I don't know how other teams' rosters shape up, where is there a punter that's going to somehow come free.
And that's a possibility.
And listen, I have a feeling that we'll be talking about a couple guys throughout the season because – Malone's issue in New York, and he has a good overall average for his career, but the net is not very good. It's like 7 or 8 yards lower than his gross, and so why is that? Is it just coverage? What is it? But because he wasn't punting after the Jets cut him, made you wonder. So in going back and looking at some of those games, some of his punts, and seeing the hang time, he'd have a hang time where it's 4.5 seconds. Well, 4.2 is good for hang time. That's fairly average, I should say. So 4.5, anything pushing 5 is really, really good. And then he'd have some that are 3.5 seconds. That's really bad. That's what his career has been. So when you know that, and then you see it out here where he kicked one yesterday, it was a booming 60-some yarder. And then the other ones are like these wobbly 35-yarders that are going out of bounds. And that's what Sav Rocca would do in crucial situations. It's a 32-yarder out of bounds at the absolute worst time.
Right.
So
Denver.
And there seemed like that was every other game that happened. Now, whether or not that's true, that's what it felt like. And so, that's where I think that's a thing to see with Malone, is to measure the consistency over the course of camp and in the games, because it's what has kind of plagued him in his career.
All right, John Keim, ESPN.com, 8:42. Ooh, I just dropped my phone. That's not good. ESPN. 9. 80, we're going to, before you have to head out to watch practice a little bit more closely, we're going to take a break. We're going to take a timeout. I want to come back and quickly discuss your exchange with D'Angelo Hall yesterday on some of the banter about where he ranks amongst the best cornerbacks. We'll let you hear that, and then we'll kind of kick that around. 8:42 and change. We're live from the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center on a beautiful Friday morning. 69 degrees. You can't beat that. Good football weather. Come on out. If you're heading down to Richmond, get here now. Boys are on the practice field already. Afternoon walkthrough should be fun. No problem. No rain in the forecast later on this afternoon. And we will bring you all-day coverage from here in Richmond on the home of the Redskins, ESPN 980. Who's this, Cakes? Give you 30 cents if you can get it.
Very nice. Very nice.
How about me being generous? 30 cents. Rub a quarter and a nickel together for you if you can figure out who this is. 8:47.
Summertime, baby.
There you go. It's a good one. You and I have partaken in a little Kenny Chesney, huh?
I missed going to see him this summer a lot. And my wife is a huge fan of his, and I've grown to become a huge fan of his.
Yeah.
But to me, it's such a good concert. Such a good concert.
Tremendous. And the Redskins have had him at FedEx Field, like you mentioned. This year he did not tour. He took off. He's got another album coming out, I think, in September. He just debuted a new single just within the last month. I would imagine he's probably going to make another stadium tour next year. Hopefully. And the Redskins have had tremendous success with him. Now, I thought the concert with Tim McGraw, back in August of 2012, was better than the one last year.
Agreed.
But it was also a harder weekend to get people out to a big concert like that because it was Memorial Day weekend at FedEx Field and so on and so forth. Anyway, we kind of get back from a little Chesney to a little Redskins. We are here at the Bon Secours Washington Redskin Training Center. Players and coaches and administrators still streaming onto the field, so they'll kind of crank things up here. I think that's Leonard Hankerson walking past us. Yep. And, of course, he is on preseason PUP as he continues his rehab from his ACL injury from last mid-November in Philadelphia. John, one of the interesting things that I wanted to get to before you have to head out to the practice field and get a better look-see is this. You mentioned, I didn't even see it because I was still wrapping up a little vacation right before camp. D'Angelo was kind of bantering about on Twitter, and you brought it up. And I'm going to play the exchange, and then we're going to get into this where D'Angelo ranks, because I think any assertion that he's the best cornerback in the game is a little bit preposterous. And I love D'Angelo, but I mean, it's a little bit preposterous. But it was a very interesting exchange, and there was more to it. But here was the meat and potatoes exchange between John Keim, D'Angelo Hall yesterday here in Richmond.
D'Angelo, there was some debate in the offseason among corners, who's the best, who does this great, who does this. You had a couple tweets the other night. Seemed a little bit annoyed that maybe you weren't more in that conversation. And, first of all, do you feel you should be? And where do you feel you stack up among those guys at this point? You're the best. Go right ahead.
Well, Jay Reed, I mean, as a corner, if you don't feel like you're the best, you got a problem right there. But, I never said I was the best. I'd be a fool to think 11 years in I'm the best in the game right now. But I definitely think I'm pretty successfully doing what I do. And like I said, man, I put if you really watch film, let's go watch film, and I put my film against any corner in the league, and we'll see what he does, we'll see what I do, and we can go from there. But I definitely think that if you put me out there against a receiver, any one of them, I'll take my chances. But I never said I was the best, but I definitely feel like I should be in the conversation.
All right, so D'Angelo is kind of backing off this assertion that he is the best. I don't think anybody in their right mind thinks that D'Angelo Hall is the top cornerback in the National Football League, not when you play in a league that has Richard Sherman, Darrell Revis, even Peterson, the kid in Arizona, and I know some people are kind of split on him. We'll get a bird's-eye view of him in early October. And then there's plenty of other guys that are into that mix. Now, where would you, if I just asked you right off the top of your head, would you put D'Angelo in the top 10 of NFL corners?
That would mean I'd have to go back and check a lot of other corners, and that's hard to do. I don't know about a top 10 because that means, and here, the part of the reason why is, I think D'Angelo had a really good year last year. And I think he's done some things throughout his career that have been very, very good. And I think part of the thing with D'Angelo Hall is that I think there's a perception with him that he has to keep outrunning. First it was he didn't tackle. Well, since he's been here, I've seen him do that. But if he misses a tackle, the old stereotype comes up. Well, he's not a good tackler. Well, actually, he does a really good job in that area, and that's why these coaches have liked him, because they feel he does a good job there. So he has to, he doesn't play this coverage well. Well, now, press man, when he was at the Raiders, that's something he didn't do. Now that's what he does well, and he doesn't do the other stuff well. So it's really, I think there's, for him, I couldn't put him in that top 10 necessarily, because I think you have to be a lot more consistent in your career than he's been. The previous year, listen, he didn't have a really good 2012. In fairness to him, he was being asked to play in the slot, and he's not suited for that. No. He's better outside. So while he did not have as good a 2012, it wasn't the best spot. 2011, I thought he was pretty good. 2010, I didn't think he had a great year, and he made the Pro Bowl. He made these big-time plays. And, but I thought in 2011 and 2013, he may have been better. And definitely I thought in 2013 he was better, more consistent than he was in 13. But, I think I think he can be underrated at times. I know, people have strong opinions of him, and I think some people who do haven't let go of some of those
I think that's
throughout the career. And that's why if they look at him as possibly being a team leader, I'm sure some people kind of laugh at that. But when you're around him, you see how the guy has definitely matured. And, I enjoy talking to D'Angelo Hall. And sometimes because he gives us really good stuff.
No, absolutely.
But I do think he understands he has progressed in his career more, or matured in his career more than some people would give him credit for. But to be a top 10 is awfully tough, because I think it's that consistency. But I think his point would be put him in the conversation, because he does some things that get overlooked. And I think, you can't just look at what Calvin Johnson's numbers were against the Redskins last year. Look at the matchup that he had one-on-one. Yes, he caught some balls on him. Calvin Johnson's going to catch it on anybody. But he did some good things against him as well.
Well, D'Angelo jumped that route for the pick six.
He did some other things.
And maybe that's more on, certainly more on Matthew Stafford, but that was a great play by D'Angelo.
Yeah, and he Des Bryant, it's Brandon Marshall. I mean, he went up against a lot of guys where he was able to do it. And I think the one thing with D Hall, sometimes you look at him and he knows who he can sit on. He knows what routes he can sit on. He's a smart corner. He knows the guys who he's threatened more by deep, and sometimes in those cases he would play a little bit more off them, not to get beat deep, and giving up stuff underneath. And that's where you'd say, oh, he's giving up a lot of balls. Because of that, I think he was playing so much not to get beat deep sometimes in the past that he allowed a lot of stuff in front of him. But he is a good corner still.
And I think he's going to really enjoy kind of the continued metamorphosis, if you will, of this defense.
Yeah,
and being more aggressive, being more in your face, being more hands-on, being more man-to-man press. That doesn't mean that they're not going to play off man sometimes. That doesn't mean that they're not going to play zone at times. But their philosophy is going to be more get in your grill and disrupt your route.
And then, the other thing is, too, and listen, if you're a top 10 corner, you're going to get some pretty strong offers on the free agent market that he wasn't going to get. And so, that's a perception, that's the reality of the contract for him is that, and then it's perception around the league. So, and I think if you want to be that guy, then come out and prove it again this year, which is a tough thing to do in the NFL. But that's how if you go out and have that really good year, follow up with another good year, and let's say you make the Pro Bowl, okay, you're back in the discussion as being a guy who's at a certain level, and that's what he has to do. So, and I think he knows that, and like I said, I think that guy has matured a lot more than people probably give him credit for. And I know he's spent a lot of time with Darryl Green working out and talking and picking his brain about how he survived that long. And I think D'Angelo, he has a good perspective on the game, the career. I enjoy talking to him. I think he's a very smart guy.
We're going to get back to later on in the show, before we have to get out of here, we're going to get back to D'Angelo on his leadership evolvement, if you will. Coming up next, John's going to head out to the practice field, and we'll check in as much as he possibly can. Coming up next, we're going to debut a little segment I'm going to call Fancy Stats Friday with my buddy Neil Greenberg from the Washington Post. He'll join us, and he wrote an interesting post. How many games should Robert Griffin III actually have won in his first 2 years? We'll attempt to answer that next on Fancy Stats Friday. We're coming to you live from the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center in beautiful Richmond, Virginia. On a Friday morning, practice underway here in Richmond. Come and join us on ESPN 980. All righty, we welcome you back. Nice to have you aboard with us. It is 9:02 and change here on ESPN 980. We're still trying to work on some things. There have been some changes to the schedule, so we're just trying to confirm some things. We might have to push our scheduled guest for later on to Monday, so we'll just try and get you official confirmation on that as soon as we can. But Redskins practice is underway. John Gruden is here, along with Jim Gruden, who is John and Jay's brother. Of course, the Redskins are hosting a little coaches clinic over at the Science Museum right next door to the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center here in Richmond a little bit later on. And as we get practice underway, of course, so much of the talk has been about Robert Griffin III and what he can do better, and we just discussed a lot of that with John Kahn of ESPN.com. My buddy Neil Greenberg, who does the Fancy Stats blog in the Washington Post. You can read it, WashingtonPost.com. And again, follow him on Twitter at @ngreenberg, @ngreenberg on Twitter. And he joins us now for a little debut of something we're going to do, a little Fancy Stats Friday. That's what he calls his blog. Fancy Stats. I'm going to call it Fancy Stats Friday on the air with us on ESPN 980. And Neil joins us now via the telephone up in D.C. Hello, Neil. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, as always. Some great posts this week on not only football, but a number of different sports and different kind of athletes and figures, and we'll get to some of them. We'll kind of keep it football related. But the one reason that really kind of stood out to me was your blog post from a couple of days ago on WashingtonPost.com titled simply, Redskins quarterback Robert Griffin III should have won more games. Now, you have a pretty complicated formula, and you lay it all out, and it's really good stuff if you're a stat head and if you like numbers and if you like comparative things to compare. Why don't you explain a little bit about what you tried to accomplish in that one particular blog post?
So a lot of times quarterbacks are judged on wins and losses. And as you know, I mean, there's a lot more that goes into the game to get a victory. But a lot of times the quarterback is kind of saddled with the record. So I looked at his performance, and I looked at it based on, as you said, a formula that's called adjusted yards gained per pass attempt. And all that tries to do is try to figure out, how many, each time he brings the football back to throw it, how many yards does he gain after taking into account interceptions and also touchdowns? It's probably a better way to express a quarterback's performance than the quarterback rating or ESPN's QBR or anything like that. It's a simple stat. I think that the formula might be a little bit complicated, but just like any type of performance metric, the higher it is, the better it is. And I looked at those quarterbacks that were comparable to RG3 since he's been in the league. And what I found was I think there was 7 quarterbacks that were comparable. They all had winning records, or at least non-losing records. I think that Phillip Rivers was 24-24. So that kind of stood out to me a little bit, and I dove a little bit deeper. And on average, we would have expected RG3 to win 4 more games than he did over that span.
Yeah, because it's 7.49 adjusted yards gained per pass attempt. And again, I'm not trying to confuse anybody. It's obviously a metrics, but like you said, you stack him up to Alex Smith, Ben Roethlisberger, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, who you just mentioned, and then there's that Tony Romo guy. And again, Robert is right in that general neighborhood, or at least he's on the same block. And you take a guy like Alex Smith, who's 30-9, and yet has a lower number. Now, again, I guess the obvious question for me would be, well, that's more about the team as opposed to the individual, correct?
Well, yeah, and that's a little bit of what I'm trying to get at in the post is that, we need to look at, because there's been a lot of rankings that have been coming out that are putting Robert Griffin III dead last in the NFC East, and it hasn't really had him all that highly ranked when it comes to quarterbacks in general. But a lot of those metrics look behind you, and what I'm trying to do is have a little bit more of a projected look at what we can see this year, next year, et cetera. And what this stat in particular is telling me is that RG3 is probably better than what the numbers are saying. Now, how much better we can probably debate. And like you said, I mean, with a better offensive line, I'm sure the numbers look a lot better. Maybe a new passing scheme with Jay Gruden, the numbers could look better, et cetera. But I think the takeaway here is that, you know, we really need to do a much deeper dive on all sports. I mean, obviously we're talking about quarterbacks, but to really get to the root of what contributes to winning in the sport.
Neil Greenberg from the Washington Post and the Fancy Stats blog here joining us on a little segment that I'm going to call Fancy Stats Friday. I love the Post. I mean, it's your post on WashingtonPost.com. I should clarify that because you really kind of support with the help of Pro Football Reference and you kind of lay it all out, and I think it's fascinating stuff. I highly suggest if you love statistics and metrics, Neil does a tremendous job not only with this particular blog post but also all the other stuff. So highly suggest that you check that out, WashingtonPost.com. Now, a couple other things that I wanted to kind of get into while we have you here on our little debut segment of Fancy Stats Friday here on ESPN 980. You wrote about Andy Dalton and comparing him to Colin Kaepernick a little bit on the Post site. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you were trying to get at there? Because I think people, when they look Andy Dalton, they say, okay, I mean, he's been good, he's been productive. But Colin Kaepernick has been with a pretty good team. He's got a rifle arm. He's a better athlete. What comparison were you trying to go there?
Well, Andy Dalton's contract is coming up, and he's looking for obviously a long-term deal. And the owner of the Bengals came out and said that he believes it should be in kind of the same range that Kaepernick's deal was, which was 6 years, $126 million. And my guess is they're looking at it strictly from a conventional stats point of view. I mean, if you look at, Dalton has started 48 games to Kaepernick's 23. Dalton has thrown for more yards, he's thrown more touchdowns, et cetera. But there's similar to what baseball has in terms of wins above replacement or wins added. Football has something very similar. It's done by Brian Burke over at Advanced Football Analytics. And the idea here is that while Andy Dalton may look to have better stats on paper, when you look at his contributions to the team actually winning, then it's actually much worse than Kaepernick is, to the tune of almost more than half. So, when you look at Andy Dalton from that perspective and what a team has paid for a win from a quarterback, then he's probably worth closer in the 8 to 11 million year per range based on the 2013 season than anywhere close to the type of money that Colin Kaepernick's getting.
Neil Greenberg joining us from the Washington Post. You can check out his stuff, WashingtonPost.com, here on Fancy Stats Friday. We kind of knocked down Robert Griffin III, knocked down the Andy Dalton and Colin Kaepernick comparison. Again, read all of his stuff, WashingtonPost.com. You can follow Neil at @NGreenberg. One last thing for you. One of your latest posts, just I think late last night, was Adrian Peterson, and it's titled, "The Vikings' Adrian Peterson has less than 3 years left." And again, we know the lifespan of a running back, and I'm curious by this because, Jamal Charles gets a new contract, and, Adrian Peterson is still ahead of him, yet Adrian Peterson has rebounded from that awful injury suffered in late 2011 at FedEx Field against the Washington Redskins. But we know at some point running backs just hit a wall, just like Sean Alexander did right after he got his new contract in Seattle. They just hit a wall and never recover and never get better from that point.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason is that the peak for a running back is so close to the time they just start dropping off the face of the earth. Mm-hmm. I mean, the peak performance for a running back on average is probably somewhere between 23, 24, 25 years old, but then the decline rapidly comes at 27 and over. So what we're seeing is a running back having some great years, he's getting rewarded with a great contract, and then a year or two his production just drops off the face of the earth. And I think we're starting to see teams become a little more hip to it and a little bit more leery of spending the big bucks. I mean, we look at some of the contracts that were given out this year. It was not a lot. I think the top 10 contracts for running backs were lower than the top 10 contracts for wide receivers, and that's something we haven't seen probably in quite a while. So I think that's the situation now. As far as Peterson's concerned, he really has had a very high workload, especially his first couple of years in the league, and then you look at some of the injuries he has, and based on his projected workload, he probably doesn't have a whole lot of seasons left. And that's true for all running backs. I mean, the more they work, the shorter their careers will probably be. And we're probably going to see it with Adrian Peterson in the near future.
Neil Greenberg, Fancy Stats Friday. You can read him in the Fancy Stats blog section of the WashingtonPost.com. My friend, thank you very much. As always, great work. If you love analytics, if you love numbers, if you love statistics, I try and write my inside the numbers. Nothing can compare to what the kind of things that you're crunching out there on the Washington Post. Good job, as always, and I appreciate you, and we'll talk to you hopefully next Friday, all right?
All right, that sounds great. Thank you so much.
There you go. That's Neil Greenberg. Follow him at @NGreenberg. Redskins getting on the practice field. Tight ends working out right in front of us, hitting the blocking sled. Niles Paul going into it. My man Logan Paulson's got his helmet up, a little warm out here on a Friday morning. Jordan Reed is getting ready to do his thing. Rookie Ted Bowles are right in front of us here at the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center. It is 9:14 and 30 seconds. Jeff Darlington of the NFL Network expected to join us later on this hour. When we come back, we'll go back to D'Angelo Hall for just a minute, and something that I asked him about yesterday about being a leader and what exactly he is to this team. We'll explain all of that when we come back. ESPN 980.
ESPN.
All right, we welcome you back. 9:19 on the nose. We're live on a Friday morning from the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center. Just a programming update. We've been told that, some things are obviously out of our control. Robert Griffin III is expected to join us now Monday at some point, we think after practice. And special teams coordinator Ben Kotwika is going to join us right off the practice field today. So a little kind of shifteroo, if you will. Sorry about that, but, these things are fluid, and there's a lot of national media here today. I believe Peter King is here. I haven't seen him yet. Jeff Darlington from the NFL Network is here. He's going to come and join us in about 10 or 11 minutes. As well, John Gruden, brother of Jay, former Super Bowl winning head coach, and their dad is here as well with all of these coaches that are here for the coaches clinic. So just some things, are fluid, and just stay with us, be patient, and we'll bring you the very best coverage that we possibly can. So Jeff Darlington will join us. We'll hear from Stephen Bowen. Caught up with him for a little one-on-one off the practice field yesterday. Of course, he's on PUP. Andre Roberts in the 10 a.m. hour. And as well, again, Ben Kotwika, special teams coordinator, expected to join us live here in color, in person, before 11 o'clock or right there around. ESPN 980, we are the only broadcast radio station in the Washington, D.C. market, here live at the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center overlooking the practice fields. I see Leonard Hankerson running with the sled, so that's good. He looks pretty good, running some sharp sprints, so that's good news. Hopefully Hank, who's a great route runner and I think a really good weapon on third down, can get back to form. Who knows? Maybe he'll have to open up on regular season PUP. We'll have to see. As I mentioned, Stephen Bowen, he is, we'll catch up with him, take the interview from yesterday. He is out right in front of me now, kind of loosening up and trying to get back from the microfracture knee surgery on his right knee. But before we go any further, I wanted to ask D'Angelo Hall this. As part of a summer project that I wanted to do, and we just couldn't hook up. So I wanted to make sure I addressed it early when they put him at the podium yesterday. I have contended all throughout the offseason that D'Angelo Hall, not only as a leader on this team, but more his influence in the organization is growing and growing and growing. And people might go, oh, no, that cannot happen. How could you allow... Not me, Angelo, not the same guy we've seen, get burnt from time to time. Not the same. No, you can't do that. D'Angelo Hall's imprint on this organization, whether you like him, whether you don't like him, whether you agree or disagree, is growing by the day. It's getting larger. And I'm okay with it. I got to be honest with you. I was a big critic of D'Angelo Hall early in his career in Atlanta, at Oakland, even when he first came here. Thought it was a terrible signing from the Redskins. And D'Angelo and I haven't always seen eye to eye on that. I think D'Angelo has matured and changed a lot as a person. I asked him yesterday this question, and listen to how he answered, and more importantly, listen to what he cited, and then really kind of what he's trying to get at and what I'm trying to get at for a potential future, both with the Redskins and the NFL.
D'Angelo, with London gone, and you were just talking about Ryan, can you talk about how you've kind of grown into more of a leadership role, both on the field and in the organization, and just how much, I guess, more comfortable you feel in that area maybe than you did 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, this is going to be the first camp in a long time, that I hadn't had a guy like Fletcher around. So, it's definitely the onus is on me. Meeting with Jay this offseason, he kind of stressed that to me, and, I embraced it. I felt like I was ready for it. London, I try to stay in his hip pocket as much as possible. So, I'm definitely up for the challenge. I understand it's not about me, it's about this team, and I'm just trying to get everybody better. If I can have David Amerson or some of these other young guys step up and make plays, that's ultimately what I want to happen. I want those guys to eventually take over when I'm done, or I can't do it anymore.
D'Angelo Hall talking about passing the torch. Earlier in that press conference, he talked about not having and realizing he didn't have much football left, wanting to win, wanting to have fun. He's out there on social media. He says, I'm listening to this debate about who the best cornerback is in the league. All I have to say is film don't lie. Go put mine on and let's talk. D'Angelo is still going to be D'Angelo. He's still going to be at times D'Angelo Hall, who you don't like. He's going to be a little brash. He's going to be a little bold. He's going to be a little confident. Here's what he also is going to be. And again, people don't want to buy into this yet. And he understands this, and he even made reference to it yesterday. D'Angelo Hall is not only going to be an on-field leader, he is going to be an ear in Jay Gruden and Jim Haslett and Dan Snyder and Bruce Allen's. He's going to be a bug in their ear, and he's going to say, guys, look, this is what we have to do from our perspective if you want us to be better, if you want us to excel, if you want us to take the next step. We've got to play more aggressive coverage. D'Angelo Hall wants to play more press man, wants to be more in your grill, wants to be and test himself. Hell yeah, he's going to get burnt. But he's going to get burnt, and he's going to make some big plays, as John and I kind of alluded to. And then moving forward, he's going to say, you know what? I can help bring Deshaun Jackson here. You guys all love Deshaun Jackson, right? Well, part of the reason why Deshaun Jackson is here is because D'Angelo Hall wanted him here. Is because D'Angelo Hall went out and said, you know what? I can help recruit this guy. I can help bring you the goods. Make no mistake about it. There were other reasons why Deshaun Jackson is here, but Deshaun Jackson was recruited, cultivated, talked to, mentored in a way, and still continues to be, by D'Angelo Hall. And then as you spin it forward just a little bit more, real quickly, as you spin it forward, D'Angelo has said, and maybe he's joking, he wants to be a general manager one day. You know what? He's got a long way to go for that. But nobody would have thought that Ozzie Newsome could turn out to be as good of a general manager as he's become. Nobody would have thought that John Elway, who was, oh, by the way, brash, arrogant, cocky, and unliked at times, would turn out to be essentially the general manager that he is, right? I'm just saying, D'Angelo's going to have plenty of options, but I wouldn't put anything past that guy. Take a timeout right here. We're approaching 9:30. Quick bottom of the hour, DC Sports Center. The NFL right now coming up. Another NFL Network face drops by our temporary place. That's next. ESPN 980. It's out on the practice field. I'm Chris Russell. Nice to have you aboard with us. It is 9:33 and change. We are live from the Bon Secours Washington Redskins Training Center here, overlooking the practice fields as the team is on the fields right now, kind of getting their main practice in. Afternoon walkthrough. Beautiful day so far. Nice little breeze. Heading up into the mid-80s. Come and join us all weekend. It'll be hot as you know what this weekend, baby. It is Richmond. It is the summer. It is late July. And joining us right now on the NFL right now from the NFL Network is Jeff Darlington. Jeff, thank you very much for time, and I appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yeah, beautiful day out here today. This is not, hopefully it can stay this exact temperature. I'm sure it will not.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
But it is dry, and it is a little bit of a kind of a nice breeze in the air.
Well, you are based out of Miami, so you know all about heat and humidity and all that stuff. That's my nice way of cleaning up what I wanted to say. So this has got to be like paradise on earth for you.
I kind of got a little chuckle yesterday in the media room when the bolt of lightning came through and everybody freaked out, and I was like, that's just a little lightning.
That's just normal, stuff.
But in Florida, we don't have like a lot to like be tough about. No. So that's like our one thing, 2 p.m. thunderstorm really threw people off yesterday.
The most amazing thing about Florida is, as you look out onto the practice field, right? At the 35-yard line, it could be a downpour, lightning, thunder, just monsoon-like rain at the 35-yard line. Yeah. And at the 30-yard line, it could be sun, 95 degrees, and like somebody's hanging out with like an umbrella over their head, just shielding themselves from the sun.
Literally, I think it was in 2006 in a training camp practice. I think it was Dave or his brother, one of the videographers for the Dolphins, actually got struck by lightning, and they had to stop practice, and he lost hearing in 1 year. I'm not laughing about it. The guy. He's a great guy. He's fine, but yeah, that's what you deal with when you're in Florida.
No doubt.
Amongst other weird things.
Yeah, there's plenty of weird things. We'll get to the Miami Dolphins and a big year for them as another quarterback going into year 3. But clearly you are here, and you're here through the weekend. And as part of NFL Network's coverage, I'm sure you'll be doing hits on, you guys are doing extensive all-day coverage during training camp. Right. So invite football fans to go to NFL Network and check out what these guys are working on, both NFL Network, NFL.com. But Robert Griffin III is, of course, the big storyline here. So much has been made about what happened with Mike and Kyle Shanahan. I want to ask you about that. Moving forward, what is your best guess now that you've heard from Jay Gruden, you've heard from Robert Griffin III? I don't know exactly who you've talked to. What is your best guess about making this marriage work, and will it be a harmonious kind of relationship as opposed to what it was?
I mean, quite frankly, I think it's all just about the knee. And I think that it was so crazy when the knee injury occurred. A week before, maybe even a day before, it was as blissful as it could get. Mike Shanahan had led the team to a late season run, 7 wins in a row. Robert Griffin III was on top of the world. Everything was okay. As soon as that injury occurred, it was like the stock market crashed. And it was all about the knee. I mean, I think Kyle Shanahan and Robert could have been an effective combination for years if that injury didn't occur. Now, of course, you can't talk about the knee without talking about the way that Robert was being used. Mm-hmm. So it's not as if these two things are mutually exclusive. I think that Jay Gruden understands how he needs to manage Robert based on the mistakes that were made in the Shanahan era. As a result, he's going to have a nice edge, a nice history to learn from. So you would think that things will go okay, but I still think it's about the health of Robert, and that's what will lead to the harmonious relationship.
You go to a lot of organizations, and you get a little glimpse, much better glimpse than I do, who's basically here 24/7. You see this old school versus new school mentality. The league has changed, players have changed, coaches have had to change. Sure. Clearly, Jay and Robert are closer together in terms of age and maybe hipness than maybe Robert and Mike were. Do you sense that being kind of a big storyline around the NFL about how hip these coaches have to be and how relatable they have to be to their star young players, whether it be a star quarterback or a star wide receiver, something like that?
It could go both ways. I mean, Andrew Luck is the biggest nerd in the world. He still uses the flip phone. But you can also look at what happened in Tampa with who's here right now, Raheem Morris. I mean, it was the other direction with that. It was almost as if he was too hip for that role. So I think that it's always going to be about finding not necessarily the guy who can. I think the best coaches are the ones who can walk that line that borders on disciplinarian and players coach. A guy who can have the respect of his players, but not be considered overbearing. And I know that's always a lot to ask for, but when you look at guys like Pete Carroll, who really knows how to. I mean, Pete Carroll's the oldest coach in the NFL, yet you could argue that he's also the hippest. I mean, that he's able to go to Marshawn Lynch and get the most out of him with this holdout aside. He's able to go into that locker room and really get the most out of those players. So, I don't think that. I mean, Mike Shanahan, I know this sounds crazy, is not like he was this square guy. I mean, Kyle is probably amongst the most relatable to these players of offensive coordinators throughout the league. So I think ego might be more important than hipness. I think, it is necessary to be able to relate to your players, but it's also necessary to be able to have their respect.
I look at a guy like Sean Payton in New Orleans.
He's a good example.
I mean, he's running conditioning tests with his team. We know he's pretty cool and he's pretty hip and he's young and he's exotic in terms of what he wants to do offensively. And I kind of look at, he's not rah-rah shish kumbah necessarily, but he's just kind of, he's not Pete Carroll, but he just kind of is suave, know? And I don't know if Mike Shanahan was like that. And interesting, while we were talking, Mike Shanahan's telling now reporters, and I obviously knew this, I think we all know this, Mike Shanahan wants to coach again.
Sure.
And I wonder if his style, kind of the great overseer, the great purveyor of, football, and Mike Shanahan knows more football in the last 5 minutes than I'll ever know in my life. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that kind of style can work with today's young athletes.
Yeah, if it is the case, I think it's a matter of making sure that you delegate properly and have the right people in place to be able to handle it. I mean, I covered Parcells in South Florida, and I understand that Parcells is a Hall of Fame guy. Look, I'm from New Jersey. I grew up loving those Giants. But that being said, I thought that Parcells in his later years, especially in Miami, was a dinosaur when it came to the modern way that the game is played. Now, he could relate to all those guys. Mm-hmm. They loved it when he would come down to the field. He was able to sit there and make them laugh and enjoy their company. But I think that from a gamesmanship standpoint, employing these big, huge-bodied guys as opposed to fast, speedy guys in this day in NFL is not going to work. So I still think it goes much more into the scheme as opposed to the relatability.
What's the number one story that you care about league-wide this year?
This year, I want to see if Peyton can get a Super Bowl, but that's kind of down the line. I guess when it comes to training camps, I mean, it's always interesting because I think that the teams that get the most coverage in the offseason are usually the ones that get the least coverage in December and January. So, suggesting that we should all care about Johnny Manziel makes sense from the standpoint that it's good drama, but chances are Manziel's name will not be near the top of the storylines in December. So it's tough to say. But yeah, I want to see what happens with JFS.
Steve Weiss yesterday, your colleague from the NFL Network, said the Oakland Raiders, and he wanted to see how kind of the dinosaur defensive guys that they've added to the puzzle. I was never expecting that. You're a Miami guy. You covered the Dolphins, obviously, for a while. You're still based down there. I know you're going to head down there and check out their camp. But Ryan Tannehill was drafted.
That's a very intriguing storyline.
A couple of spots after Robert. I mean, where is he? And obviously, we know what mess happened in that organization last year. Is that organization as dysfunctional as it appears from the outside? Because at times, I think from my bubble here, this organization is like, whoa. Is that one
not
weird?
Within the locker room? Okay. No, it's really not. I mean, there is definitely dysfunction, and there is definitely learning curves to be had down there. You've got an owner who's been in Steve Ross, who's not been doing it very long and is still learning the ropes and doing so in very dramatic fashion. But in terms of the locker room, when we talk about the Richie Incognito, Jonathan Martin situation, no, it is not nearly as just dysfunctional. I guess is the only word we can use. As it might seem, the locker room is pretty tame and actually a really enjoyable place to be from a reporter standpoint. I know a lot of those guys pretty well. I think that Ryan is going to be a very intriguing player to watch. They've got some good weapons around him. Whether or not the offensive line now, in the wake of what happened, can rebound. I mean, with Pouncey out as well, you're talking about a starting line that's going to have completely new players, all five of them.
That's the problem.
That's a tough thing to get
that's
past.
the one unit that you need really good cohesion. You talk to anybody in football, the offensive line's got to have that cohesion between the starting five. Hard to do that.
And by the way, doing it with having lost their offensive line coach, who's been eliminated through all this, and also you consider the fact that assistant offensive line coach was gone midseason last year. So they're doing it all. It's a complete makeover. A lot of people like Bill Lazor, the guy who came from Philadelphia, seems to be bringing that Philadelphia style down there, that fast-paced tempo. So could be fun to watch. I just don't know how much you can accomplish with an offensive line like that.
Last thing for you, and then we'll let you go. Jeff Darlington, NFL Network, joining us. You can follow him, watch him on NFL Network. Follow him on Twitter, at Jeff Darlington on Twitter. Ray Rice suspended 2 games by the NFL for what happened in the casino with his wife. And everybody's outraged because we're suspending in this league, guys, 4 games for a first-time violation for PEDs. Four games, and sometimes indefinitely for guys like Josh Gordon, Tanar Jackson. Gordon, but we're suspended. And then you see that. Yeah. What do you make of that?
It's one of those situations where, from the sound of it, it sounds like that there's more information to be had. Now, we've seen that video, and it is disturbing. What happened in the elevator? That's where the people on Ray Rice's side will contest and contend that it would reveal a different side to things. Well, if that's the case, then where is that video? I guess that's the tough part I have with a lot of these situations where you have a side saying, well, you don't understand everything. Well, then make me understand it. If the public doesn't understand it, and clearly they don't, then make us understand it. What can you show us to make us feel otherwise? And if that evidence does exist, and apparently it does, then let's see it. So I guess it's difficult to sympathize with the Ray Rice side of things, even if it's because there's if he's saying there's more to this story, it's tough to sympathize with that unless you can show us and tell us what more there is to that story.
Excellent. Jeff, appreciate you stopping by and making some time for us.
Of course.
You do a great job for NFL Network. He's been around, obviously, with the Redskins a lot. I know you're here during free agency a lot last year. I expect we'll see you a lot more down the road.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming on by.
Thanks for having me.
Jeff Darlington, NFL Network. Again, follow him on Twitter, at Jeff Darlington. Take a time out right here on ESPN 980. When we return, will we see Stephen Bowen back before we leave Richmond to head back to Redskins Park? He'll answer that kind of next. ESPN 980.
ESPN.
Howdy, we welcome you back. Nice to have you aboard with us. 9:50 and 30 seconds right here, ESPN 980 on a beautiful Friday morning. Nice gentle breeze. Thanks to Jeff Darlington, the NFL Network, for joining us. I'm going to go out and try and recruit somebody a little bit later on. Get them for the 10 o'clock hour. I think that was Jason Aldean, right? I think so. Jason Aldean and Florida Georgia Line at Nationals Park tonight. If you're heading out there, that should be cool. Nationals obviously away for the weekend. Another bad start for Strasburg the other day. They're going to keep it kind of all football focused here on training camp today until 11 o'clock or so. As we come to you live from the Bon Secours Washington Redskin Training Center. Real quickly, before we hit the top of the hour, Stephen Bowen opened up on preseason pup. He's been working out on the side, on the drill fields. He is not running like I would prefer to see, I guess, at this point. Certainly not running like I see Leonard Hankerson running. Now, clearly they had different surgeries, and one's younger, and so on and so forth. So, I'm not sure exactly what the time frame for Stephen Bowen is. So I went up to the big fella yesterday after practice. We have a pretty good relationship, and that was part of what I wanted to ask him. So my little one-on-one conversation off the practice field yesterday afternoon with Stephen Bowen of the Redskins. How you feeling, all right?
Yeah, I'm feeling good, man. Able to run some sprints and stuff like that. So, everything's moving along that I wanted to be. I'm looking good, feeling good. So I think next couple of weeks I should be out there, man.
I know you said all offseason your goal was to be ready for day one. When did you come to the realization that you just weren't going to be exactly 100% where you wanted to be, and that it was better not to rush through it.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to take their time with me. You know, we still got time, and, you know, I mean, if it was do or die, yeah, I probably could be out there, but it's not even worth it. You know, want to get me 100% and be ready for the season.
When you said you were able to do some sprints, I saw you do some conditioning out on the side work. How frustrating or how difficult is it for you, a guy who's used to being out there with the team, to kind of have to work on your and kind of harness some of your want to do more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little difficult, but you know, it's just good to be out here. It's a blessing that, you know, I'm making progress and I'm not staying stagnant, and I'm just happy for the progress I'm making, and I'm just excited to get back out there with my brothers on the D-line.
In 2011, when you first came here, you were a guy who not only stopped the run, but you got after the quarterback. Obviously, injuries have kind of chipped away a little bit. Do you think when you come back that you will still be the same Stephen Bowen, or the Stephen Bowen that you were in 2011, which is a guy who can not only stop the run, but again, really crash the pocket along with the other guys you have?
Absolutely, man. I expect nothing but perfection out of myself. I'm working hard every day. My legs getting stronger. And, you know, it's almost a blessing because, you know, when I get back out there, I didn't have, like, a lot of pounding on my legs, so I feel like I'll be pretty fresh.
When you look at how this defense has improved, obviously they bring in your best friend, Jason Hatcher, and we know he's kind of limited to start here, but Chris Baker should elevate to a starting role. You still have Jarvis Jenkins. You have Barry. When you look at this defensive line, I know you told me during the offseason that you can be the best defensive line. Do you still hold true to that, or do you believe even more so now if you guys are all healthy?
Absolutely. I feel like we have so much talent on our D-line, and at this point with Bake and Jink playing in the defense for a couple of years, and they're getting older and maturing, they're understanding, you know, what offensive linemen, what offense is trying to do to us. So they're real comfortable and they're playing well, and I feel like we can be as good as we want to be, man. So, I mean, I'm expecting us to be one of the best defensive lines in the league, and we have high expectations in our group.
Last thing for you, how important was it that Haz and Jacob Burney stayed for you individually and for you guys that know this defense?
Absolutely. I mean, we love the defense, and Coach Gruden believes in our defense, and they know the guys that we have on the D-line, what we're capable of. So having them guys back and believing in us, I mean, it's great. It's amazing.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
All right, that's Stephen Bowen, number 72, Redskins defensive end. My guy, I love Stephen Bowen. He's a good football player and a better person. So he'll be back in a couple of weeks. Again, probably not going to see him anytime soon. I know he's trying to get back for day one, but just didn't happen in time. Coming up next hour, we will play back my conversation from yesterday afternoon with Andre Roberts. I think a very intriguing addition to this team. Chatted with him for a few minutes. I'll let you hear that as well. We're expected to be joined by Special Teams Coordinator Ben Kotwika here live at the set. You never know who else we're going to be able to kind of bring on by as well. Coming up next, we'll get into our second edition of Notable, Quotable, Reasonable, and Ron Jaworski. Jaws ruffling a little feathers when it comes to the Redskins quarterback. We'll explain what we mean by that. Coming up next on the other side, DC Sports Center straight ahead. Stay tuned, live from Richmond. This is ESPN 98.